Chapter 1326. The Untainted Land. Yi Xian walked out of this place and walked towards an even vaster chaotic universe. However, he never expected that he would return in a few million years. The Untainted Land was full of stories about him, and there were many unforgettable memories. These memories had always been in Yi Xian's mind. Even though he had left for millions of years, he had never forgotten them. Yi Xian didn't know what the great desolate world had become after millions of years, or what the cultivation of his old friends and subordinates were like now. In fact, Yi Xian wanted to go back and have a look. He wanted to go back to the celestial court that he had created and see his old friends. Unfortunately, although he was now in the Untainted Land, he could not leave at all, because there was a person beside him, an extremely terrifying and dangerous person. In a valley, the Eternal Shadow was sitting on a stone wall. The death light on his body was extremely faint, and his rotten flesh could be faintly seen. He gave off an extremely weak feeling. Although this taboo character looked very weak, Yi Xian did not have any thoughts about it, because he deeply understood that a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. Even if the other party was in an extremely weak state, it would not take much effort to kill him. But Yi Xian was very curious about one thing. Why did the Eternal Shadow bring him back to the Untainted Land? How did he know about the Untainted Land? In the past, Yi Xian might have been full of curiosity about the Untainted Land. But since he entered the chaotic world, his horizons had been broadened. At this moment, the so-called Untainted Land was just SOSO in his eyes. To put it bluntly, if Yi Xian was willing, he could destroy the great desolate world with a single strike and exterminate all living beings in the great desolate world. Aeon Shadow remained silent from beginning to end, as if he was a living corpse. His scarlet eyes occasionally flashed, giving off an unfathomable feeling. How do you know about the Untainted Land? Why did you bring me back here? Yi Xian was the first to break the silence and asked the biggest question in his heart. This is the primal chaos origin. The primal chaos heavenly mysteries can't touch this place. That's why I brought you here. Even the strongest of all time can't find you and me. The ancient shadow seemed to wake up from his thoughts. He stiffly turned his head to look at Yi Xian, and gave Yi Xian an answer. Primal chaos origin? Upon hearing Eternal Shadow's words, Yi Xian was taken aback and a puzzled look appeared on his face. This star field was not large, and the so-called Great Desolation World was only a world formed after Panga's death. What did this have to do with the primal chaos origin? Yi Xian had no idea what the primal chaos origin was, but he believed that it was not that simple since Eternal Shadow had mentioned it. Chaos reincarnation, Aeon Shadow murmured. When the universe is destroyed, it goes through destruction and birth. This is also called chaos reincarnation. When chaos was born, it was called chaos origin. This is where the chaos origin is. Everything begins here, and everything ends here. How is this possible? Yi Xian was speechless after hearing Eternal Shadow's explanation. He did not expect the Great Desolation World he was in to have such a great origin. Do you know why this universe is called the Primal Chaos Universe? Do you know why there are no space behemoths, or those annoying space bugs in this star field? Eternal Shadow asked. Why? Yi Xian frowned slightly. He felt that Eternal Shadow was about to tell him a big secret. The so-called chaos is the void. From nothing to something is called chaos. Because this is the primal chaos origin, it is also the starting point of something from nothing. Thus the primal chaos heavenly mysteries are not apparent here. No living creature can sense this star field. Back then, that brat of the Panga clan was able to come here because he had the heaven-shattering scripture and the heaven-shattering cauldron in his hands. Unfortunately, that brat was too stupid. The primal chaos origin's heavenly mysteries are not apparent, and the great Tao laws are incomplete. Thus, he failed to pass the Great Saint Tribulation, and turned into a miniature world. This is the Great Desolation World you speak of, Eternal Shadow said slowly. How do you know all this? Yi Xian spoke in a daze. At this moment, the other party seemed to know everything, as if everything that happened in the Great Desolate World couldn't be hidden from him. I am unparalleled throughout the ages. I am eternal throughout the ages. Although I've always been trapped in the river of time, Your future self once walked the river of time. Naturally, I would know everything about this place. The Aeon Shadow murmured. The Eternal Shadow suddenly raised his head and sized up Yi Xian with a pair of fierce eyes. Actually, I've fought with your future, and I want to kill him in the river of time. However, he's very strong, so strong that he surpasses the strongest of all time. Although he's still a bit weaker than me, with your future cultivation, you can definitely be considered at the peak of the entire primal chaos universe. Eternal Shadow was not stingy with his praise, and Yi Xian could hear a hint of admiration in his voice. However, I know that he is illusory, because he does not belong to the present world. I once tried to divine his origins, but I discovered that he was not under the control of the primal chaos universe. Instead, he was someone who walked out of here. In other words, he is the current you. However, there is one thing that I find very strange. The so-called living beings of the primal chaos universe are nothing more than low-level creatures born of that ant Pangu. Although this is the primal chaos origin, and the workings of the primal chaos universe are not obvious, their life trajectories are included in the workings of the primal chaos universe. Even you are the same as them. However, when you entered the Elysium from the mortal world, your fate suddenly became blurry. Then, you completely broke free of the Chaosverse control. Even I don't know what happened to you, Aeon Shadow murmured. Oh. Yi Xian was stunned when he heard Eternal Shadow's words. According to what Eternal Shadow said, he was still under the control of the primal chaos universe when he was young in the mortal world. It wasn't until he entered the primal chaos universe that he truly broke free of the primal chaos universe's control. Didn't that mean that he might have done something in the mortal world that allowed him to break free of the primal chaos universe's control and reach his current state? But a moment later, Yi Xian was horrified. Even the mortal world he had been in when he was young was nothing more than a miniature dimension to him, much less the primal chaos universe. How could there be an opportunity to break free of the primal chaos universe's control? You don't have to think about it. I once divined everything you did in the mortal world, but I didn't find anything out of the ordinary. In my opinion, the mortal world was nothing more than an extremely ordinary dimension. As for why you weren't under the control of the primal chaos universe, no one knows. This is also why I didn't kill you. I believe that when the primal chaos universe reaches its end and the primal chaos cycle begins, all the answers will be revealed, Eternal Shadow said in a low voice. Chapter 1327. Yi Xian remained silent. He racked his brains about his past in the mortal world, but he couldn't find any clues. Then why did you bring me here? Yi Xian cleared his mind and looked at Aeon Shadow with a frown. I'm injured. Only by coming to the Chaos Origin can I avoid the punishment of the Chaosverse. If I stay in the Chaosverse, I'll be reduced to ashes sooner or later, Aeon Shadow said in a low voice. Then can you tell me who you are? Yi Xian asked the question that had been bothering him for a long time. Aeon Shadow was so terrifyingly powerful that he had surpassed the primordial sovereigns. His identity had to be terrifying to the extreme. Who am I? Aeon Shadow murmured, but a hint of sorrow seeped out of him. He didn't answer Yi Xian's question, because it was related to his greatest secret. Yi Xian's eyes flickered as he looked at Aeon Shadow's silence. He continued probing. As far as I know, the primordial sovereigns are the most powerful existences in the Chaosverse, but you've surpassed them. I want to know if there are any other taboo existences like you in the Chaosverse. Taboo? Aeon Shadow laughed self-deprecatingly. He was silent for a dozen or so breaths before he looked at Yi Xian with a pair of fierce eyes. The word taboo is indeed suitable for me. As for whether there are others like me, I only know of two. As for how many others there are, I'm not sure. However, based on my speculations, there are countless taboo existences hidden in the Chaosverse. It's just that they're in hiding and not known by others. Hiss. Hearing the conclusion of the Eternal Shadow, Yi Xian was shocked. He sucked in a breath of cold air in his heart. If it was really as the Eternal Shadow had said, then this chaotic universe was simply too terrifying. Yi Xian had always believed that the strongest of all time was the limit, but now it seemed that this was not the case. Just the Eternal Shadow in front of him was a taboo character. If there were more people like him, then unimaginable things would happen in the future. I've been scheming since the ancient times, all for the sake of transcendence. It's just that I'm not accepted by the primal chaos, and have always been struggling at death's door in the river of time. I'm sure it's the same for the others. They all have their own methods to conceal themselves, that's all. Now that you've left the river of time, are you going to stay here forever? Yi Xian probed. That's right. I'll stay here. If I leave the primal chaos origin, the chaos verse will punish me once more. Not only will I have to stay here, you'll have to stay by my side as well. You're not allowed to take even half a step out of the primal chaos origin. Only when the cycle of reincarnation begins can you leave with me, Aeon Shadow said coldly. You want to imprison me? Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. A sharp glint flashed through his eyes, but it quickly disappeared. You can think of it that way, but I won't imprison you. You can leave if you want, but the 8 supreme powers in your body are entangled with each other. If you leave my side, I'm afraid it won't be long before your body explodes, said the ancient shadow. Ugh! Suddenly, Yi Xian's body swelled. The 8 supreme powers within his body instantly went berserk. His body swelled like a ball, and a painful groan came from his mouth. Suppress! Aeon Shadow pointed a finger at Yi Xian, and sent the ray of withering death into Yi Xian's body, completely suppressing the 8 supreme forces. Only then did Yi Xian's swollen body return to normal. See, I'm the only one who can suppress the 8 supreme forces in your body. If you leave my side, your body will explode, Aeon Shadow said coldly. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression flickered. He didn't want to stay by Aeon Shadow's side. Aeon Shadow was too unpredictable, and every time Aeon Shadow glanced at him, there was a hint of murderous intent. Although this trace of killing intent was extremely obscure, Yi Xian could clearly sense it. Yi Xian didn't fully believe Aeon Shadow's words today. He had a feeling that Aeon Shadow was still hiding something from him. It definitely wasn't as simple as it seemed. You've been listening for so long. Are you still not going to show yourself? Aeon Shadow's 5 fingers suddenly reached for Yi Xian. A figure was pulled out of Yi Xian's body. It was Gai Tianyuan, who had carefully concealed his aura. Senior, please spare me. When Gai Tianyuan's soul was pulled out, he begged Aeon Shadow for mercy. The ray of withering death had made him feel the fear of death. A mere sempiternal realm soul fragment dares to spy on me? What kind of person was Aeon Shadow? He was a taboo existence that surpassed the eternal strongest. Gai Tianyuan might be able to hide his soul in front of the eternal strongest, so that they wouldn't know of his existence. But in front of Aeon Shadow, his methods were laughable. I'll give you a physical body. From now on, you'll be my servant. Aeon Shadow's ray of withering death shot out. In an instant, a golden body was formed and Gai Tianyuan's soul fragment was sent into it, creating something out of nothing. When this method appeared in front of Yi Xian's face changed slightly. He looked at Aeon Shadow with even more caution. Thank you, Senior, for your generous gift. After obtaining a compatible body, Gai Tianyuan slowly opened his eyes and knelt on the ground, kowtowing to Aeon Shadow. However, even though his body was golden, there was an undetectable trace of death chi. Clearly, Gai Tianyuan was completely under Aeon Shadow's control. However, Gai Tianyuan was already satisfied that he could survive and obtain a physical body. If he died in the hands of Aeon Shadow, that would be a tragedy. What happened next was simple. Gai Tianyuan transformed into Aeon Shadow's servant. The only thing he had to do was watch over Yi Xian and report back to Aeon Shadow at all times. Of course, Yi Xian's every move was under Aeon Shadow's control. Even without Gai Tianyuan, Yi Xian still wouldn't be able to escape Aeon Shadow's control. However, Aeon Shadow placed great importance on Yi Xian because he was related to the secret of opening the gate of reincarnation. Day after day passed, and time gradually flowed away. Every 10,000 years, Aeon Shadow would suppress the 8 supreme powers in Yi Xian's body. Normally, Aeon Shadow would sit cross-legged in the belly of the mountain and spit out death chi, as if to heal his injuries. During this time, Aeon Shadow also took away Yi Xian's ancient bronze scripture and heaven-punishing halberd, as if he wanted to comprehend something unknown. However, Aeon Shadow only studied them for a while before returning them to Yi Xian. This made Yi Xian extremely curious. Aeon Shadow had only shown some interest in something that even the most powerful of the Aeon valued, but he didn't seem to have any intention of taking it for himself. Yi Xian didn't think it was that simple. It was as if Aeon Shadow had studied the ancient bronze scripture and the heaven-shattering cauldron. Chapter 1328. Legend has it that the heaven-shattering scripture and 12 heaven-shattering cauldrons are the secret to opening the gate of reincarnation. But you don't seem to care too much about it? When Aeon Shadow returned the bronze scripture and heaven-destroying halberd to Yi Xian couldn't help but ask. "Huh?" Aeon Shadow sneered. Those legends were probably made up by those supreme experts. They were only half right. But even if all 12 heaven-shattering cauldrons were gathered, they still wouldn't be able to open the gate of reincarnation. After all, someone once gathered all 12, but in the end, didn't they? Suddenly, Wang Guyin's words came to a halt. He realized that if he continued, he would reveal a huge secret. Could it be that Yi Xian was an extremely intelligent person, and his thoughts were extremely meticulous? Although the Eternal Shadow had only said half a sentence, he was able to deduce an extremely terrifying thing from it. Aside from the Extreme Love Master, every one of the 10 supreme experts wanted to gather all 12 heaven-shattering cauldrons, but after 10 Yuan Hui, no one had succeeded. But just now, the Eternal Shadow actually said that someone had gathered together before. In Yi Xian's opinion, this was simply a fantasy. There was only one explanation. Boom! When this terrifying conjecture flashed through Yi Xian's mind, he felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. His heart was in turmoil, unable to calm down for a long time. If Yi Xian's conjecture was true, it would also explain why Aeon Shadow's cultivation was so terrifying. He'd even surpassed the supreme experts of ancient times. He didn't take them seriously at all. "You're very smart. Just from a few words of mine, you've guessed something." Aeon Shadow slowly nodded. His fierce eyes flickered as he looked at Yi Xian. "But you must remember that those who are too smart will die very miserably. I hope you understand this principle." His fierce eyes and warning words all indicated that Yi Xian's conjecture might be true. Yi Xian forced himself to calm down, then fell silent. Time passed, and the sea turned into mulberry fields. Aeon Shadow had settled down in this nameless mountain range. Every day, apart from healing his injuries, he sat cross-legged alone. No one knew what he was thinking. 100,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. It had already been 100,000 years since Yi Xian returned to the great desolate world. He really wanted to return to the heavenly court to take a look, and he even wanted to meet his old friends and subordinates. However, the existence of the shadow of eternity dispelled this thought. However, Yi Xian didn't waste these 100,000 years. Yi Xian's cultivation. He had Aeon Shadow's many questions. He'd ask Shadow for advice. Yi, of Aeon Shadow is that. Yi, Aeon Shadow had hats. Yi Xian's hat. But Shadow had. Yi he too. To Yi to him. To Shadow's Shadow, to. Shadow to Shadow have. To Shadow provided Shadow to. To, s. Him shadows. He's to, s. S was Shadow. S learning and cultivation. Yi Xian's progress could be said to be rapid. In just 100,000 years, he had reached the completion of the Yin realm. He was only one step away from the Yangxing realm. 100,000 years seemed to be a long time, but it was nothing for chaotic creatures. To be able to reach the completion of the Yin realm in 100,000 years was already an amazing talent in the chaotic world. In the past 100,000 years, Yi Xian was not only learning, but also trying to refine the 8 supreme forces in his body. This was because it was a ticking time bomb that could blow him to pieces at any time. If Aeon Shadow hadn't helped him suppress it, he would have died without a burial place. Yi Xian was very ambitious. He not only wanted to refine the 8 supreme forces in his body, but also wanted to use them for himself. The only thing he could count on was the Tribulation Transcender's Devour, which he hadn't used for a long time. Only this method could achieve Yi Xian's goal. Tribulation Transcender's Devour. This was a heaven-defying technique, and it was also the technique that appeared in the small cauldron. Although Yi Xian was proficient in the Tribulation Transcender's Devour, he rarely used this method. In the past, he was able to cultivate the space-time seed and cultivate the power of space-time, because the Tribulation Transcender's Devour devoured the magical ability of the ancestral witch of time and space. The Tribulation Transcender's Devour was also a devouring technique, but it was different from the Tribulation Transcender's technique. The Tribulation Transcender's technique devoured one's cultivation, while the Tribulation Transcender's Devour devoured magical abilities. Now the 8 supreme forces in Yi Xian's body had something in common with magical abilities. The Tribulation Transcender's Devour could completely devour these 8 supreme forces and turn them into Yi Xian's own. However, although the Tribulation Transcender's Devour was a heaven-defying technique, the 8 supreme forces were simply too terrifying. If Yi Xian wanted to completely devour the 8 supreme forces and turn them into his own strength, it would take an extremely long time. Fortunately, over the past 100,000 years, the power left in his body by the 8 supreme forces had been slowly devoured by the Tribulation Transcender's Devour. According to Yi Xian's estimation, it would take him less than 100 years to completely refine the 8 supreme forces. If Yi Xian's guess wasn't wrong, then if he was able to refine all 8 of the supreme powers and fuse them into the heaven burial technique that he'd created, then his own cultivation should be able to step into the perfection of Yangsheng. He could completely prepare to break through to the next great realm. However, this would take time. Yi Xian had only taken the first step. Moreover, his attention was now focused on the Eternal Shadow, because this taboo character had something that Yi Xian was very interested in. Magical ability. Yes, it was the magical ability. In the past 100,000 years, although the two had not spoken much, watching the Eternal Shadow cultivate every day and practice some forbidden secret techniques from time to time, Yi Xian could be said to be extremely envious. Although the Eternal Shadow did not show any power, just the leakage of a trace of aura let Yi Xian know that the taboo techniques mastered by the Eternal Shadow were absolutely terrifying. If he could learn a few of them, he could definitely use them as his trump cards. As the saying goes, danger and opportunity coexist. Although he was now being held hostage by the Eternal Shadow, this was also a great opportunity. If he could learn the taboo techniques of this taboo character, it would definitely be an unimaginable help for him when he returned to the chaotic world. However, what disappointed Yi Xian was that he had shamelessly asked the Eternal Shadow to teach him the taboo techniques, but all he got was a fierce look. Not to mention teaching him the taboo techniques, he did not even give him a good face. As everyone knew, the magical ability was passed down from one generation to another, and would never be passed on to outsiders. Even if the Eternal Shadow had a terrifying origin and valued Yi Xian very much, he was still very stingy about his own magical ability. After being rejected several times, Yi Xian could see that if he wanted the Eternal Shadow to teach him the taboo techniques, he was afraid that he would have to use some means. Chapter 1329. That a mouthful of turbid air was spat out from Yi Xian's mouth. A mountain rock was turned into dust, and a wisp of the heaven burial technique's aura was mixed within it. At this moment, Yi Xian also slowly opened his eyes. From the corner of his eyes, he faintly looked at the ancient shadows. The technique is not bad, but it's a pity that it's not perfect enough. If you cultivate to the peak of ancient times, you might be able to perfect this technique. The ancient shadow indifferently commented. He didn't have the slightest interest in Yi Xian's heaven-burying art. Yi Xian originally wanted to use the heaven-burying art to attract Aeon Shadow's attention, but now it seemed that Aeon Shadow didn't care. There was even a trace of contempt in his words. Obviously, this taboo character's vision was too high. His heaven-burying art was just a rough creation, and in his eyes, it was just SOSO. However, Yi Xian wasn't disappointed because he was already prepared. Tribulation Transcender Transformation. Suddenly, Yi Xian formed a hand seal with both of his hands as an explosive shout came from his mouth. His entire aura abruptly rose, and his originally perfect Yin realm cultivation abruptly advanced towards the Yang birth realm. Unfortunately, in the next moment, Yi Xian's face flushed red, and his originally soaring aura instantly fell back to the Yin realm. When Yi Xian used the Tribulation Transcender Transformation, Aeon Shadow's aura changed. He immediately looked at Yi Xian with a pair of fierce eyes. Obviously, Yi Xian's technique had attracted his attention. A taboo technique? The next moment, Aeon Shadow slowly shook his head and murmured, "No, you've cultivated the wrong taboo technique. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like this. Please enlighten me." Yi Xian's eyes moved, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Then, he instantly calmed down and began to humbly ask Aeon Shadow for advice. To be honest, Yi Xian felt the most regretful about the Tribulation Transcender Transformation. In the past, this Tribulation Transcender Transformation could be said to have been a great help to him. It could double his combat strength, but ever since he stepped into the quasi-sage realm in the Great Desolate World, this Tribulation Transcender Transformation had become useless. The effect of doubling his combat strength had gradually declined, and even when he used it, it couldn't increase his combat strength by much. Yi Xian had also studied the Tribulation Transcender Transformation, but he hadn't been able to discover why such a situation would occur. Thus, he could only put aside this heaven-defying technique. However, after experiencing some experiences in the chaotic world, Yi Xian did not believe that the method derived from the small cauldron would be so useless. He was afraid that he had gone in the wrong direction. Now, after hearing Eternal Shadow's comments, Yi Xian was naturally excited. He knew that not only had the other party noticed that his cultivation was going in the wrong direction, but he was also extremely interested in the Tribulation Transcender Transformation. Recite the scripture for me. But if one were to observe carefully, they would discover that his scarlet eyes were flashing. He was clearly not as calm as his words suggested. Yi Xian sneered inwardly, and quickly recited the scripture for the Tribulation Transcender Transformation. Of course, while reciting the scripture, poor Gai Tianyuan was driven out by Eternal Shadow. After all, whether it was Yi Xian or Eternal Shadow, neither wanted Gai Tianyuan to know about this method. What a good Tribulation Transcender Transformation! After several dozen breaths of time, the ancient shadow let out a sigh and sighed. "Senior, please enlighten me." Yi Xian's eyes moved slightly, and he hurriedly made a gesture of asking for guidance. Change! Suddenly, the withering light burst out, and Eternal Shadow's aura surged. His momentum instantly recovered to its peak. The mysterious death light hovered around his body, and Yi Xian's eyes trembled in shock. What an old monster he had cultivated to the Tribulation Transcender Transformation in a moment. It seemed that his injuries had also recovered faster because of the Tribulation Transcender Transformation. Yi Xian roared in his heart. Although he had been prepared for this, when he saw the aura of Eternal Shadow at this moment, his heart still shook fiercely. Buzz! The withering light gradually subsided, and Eternal Shadow slowly let out a breath of turbid air. Only then did he look at Yi Xian. The so-called Tribulation Transcender Transformation is all about the word change. This change is to increase your potential, not your cultivation. The methods you cultivate are too heterogeneous, and the Tribulation Transcender Transformation is used on each of your methods. This forbidden technique is scattered all over the place, so it naturally can't display the power it should have. Now, just use the Tribulation Transcender Transformation on one method, and see if there are any new changes, Eternal Shadow said. As the saying goes, a word awakens a person from a dream. After receiving instructions from Eternal Shadow, Yi Xian's eyes instantly lit up. He hurriedly used the Tribulation Transcender Transformation on the heaven-burying art. Bang! In the next moment, an extremely terrifying thing happened. A terrifying gray light erupted from Yi Xian's body. His extreme Yin realm cultivation suddenly stepped into the Yang birth realm, and a golden halo surrounded his body. So that's how it is. In the next moment, Yi Xian suddenly dispersed the tribulation transcender transformation, and a trace of self-mockery flashed in his eyes. He was really stupid. He didn't expect such a simple problem to trouble him for so long. If it weren't for Eternal Shadow's instructions today, he feared that this tribulation transcender transformation would have been wasted. This tribulation transcender transformation should be something you comprehended from the heaven-shattering cauldron. Since I have learned your method, I naturally won't take advantage of you. I will also teach you a forbidden technique. As for whether you can learn it or not, that will depend on yourself. Eternal Shadow had an extremely amazing origin, and he also had his own pride. Although it seemed that he had taught Yi Xian about the changes in the tribulation transcender technique, he had also learned this method. Naturally, he didn't want to owe Yi Xian a favor. Thank you, Senior. Yi Xian smiled slightly. I have 8 forbidden techniques, each of which is said to be extremely rare. Which one do you want to learn? Eternal Shadow didn't say any nonsense. He already knew that Yi Xian coveted his forbidden techniques, so he was very generous at this moment. Yi Xian pondered for a while and said, I wonder if Senior can introduce these 8 forbidden techniques? Illusion, Extermination, Kill, Trap, Seal, Attack, Reverse, Turn. Which one do you want to learn? Eternal Shadow's words were concise, and he didn't explain too much to Yi Xian. Yi Xian pondered for a while, thinking hard about the profound meaning of these 8 words. After an instant's stick of time, his eyes narrowed, and he made a decision in his heart. Reverse, Yi Xian said in a deep voice. When Yi Xian made his choice, Eternal Shadow's breath stopped. He thought that with Yi Xian's temperament, he would choose kill. But he didn't expect that he would choose reverse. Have you really decided? Eternal Shadow asked in a deep voice. I've decided, Yi Xian said in a powerful voice. Good. Eternal Shadow nodded slowly. In truth, Yi Xian didn't know that Eternal Shadow didn't want to teach him reverse. This was because reverse was ranked in the top 3 of the 8 forbidden techniques. It could be said that it was an extremely important forbidden technique for Eternal Shadow. The reason he had been able to survive until now was largely because of this reverse art. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was defying the good fortune of primal chaos and seizing the mysteries of the universe. However, Eternal Shadow had already made a promise. No matter how unwilling he was, he wouldn't break his promise to Yi Xian. I'll only demonstrate one transformation. Whether or not you succeed will depend on yourself. Boom! Eternal Shadow slowly stood up, the withering death light revolving around his body. He chanted one sutra after another, and strands of mysterious aura began to bloom around him. Chapter 1330. There is a cycle of reincarnation throughout the ages. Heaven and earth are destroyed. From life to death, from death to life. Without destruction, there can be no construction. Against chaos, Aeon Yin Yang's body flickered as he practiced the forbidden art. It was as if he were about to disappear from Yi Xian's eyes, as if he didn't exist in the world. Yi Xian stared at Aeon Yin Yang. He memorized all of the scriptures Aeon Yin Yang was reciting. As Aeon Yin Yang performed the forbidden art, a mysterious aura began to seep out from Yi Xian's body. Time passed by bit. Perhaps it was a day. Or perhaps it was 10,000 years. Or perhaps it was a yuan hui. Time seemed to have become illusory at this moment, and no one could detect any trace of it. When the Eternal Shadow stopped cultivating, Yi Xian was still in a state of enlightenment. He was completely immersed in the great taboo technique of the Gate of Eternity. What frightening perception! Aeon Yin Yang's lips twitched as he watched Yi Xian practice the reverse symbol art. His scarlet eyes flashed with pain, but he still couldn't stop himself from praising Yi Xian. One had to know that when he created this inverse character art, it cost him half of his life. It was also because of this inverse character art that he was able to live until now. This inverse character art could be said to be one of his treasures at the bottom of his chest. He was not even willing to teach it to his disciple. You're clearly immortal, but your perception is terrifying. Let's see how far you can go. Let's see if you can open the gates of reincarnation and help me break through this path of chaos. Aeon Yin Yang muttered. Reverse. Whoosh. Suddenly, An explosive shout came from Yi Xian's mouth as a shocking aura exploded out. His body swayed like ripples in the water, giving people the illusion that he didn't exist in the world. I've only practiced it once, and he's already grasped the basics? Despite Aeon Yin Yang's shocking background, when he saw Yi Xian erupt with the aura of the reverse symbol art, his heart trembled that Yi Xian spat out a mouthful of turbid air, as the aura of the inverse symbol art slowly receded from his body. However, in the next moment, Yi Xian broke out in a large amount of cold sweat, drenching his clothes. Huff huff huff. Yi Xian panted heavily as his face turned from red to white. Just now, when he was practicing the inverse character technique, he had consumed a total of 90% of his cultivation. If it wasn't for the fact that he felt that something was wrong and stopped, just this taboo technique alone would have sucked his cultivation dry. If you want to use a forbidden art, you naturally have to pay a certain price. The reverse symbol art seizes the good fortune of primordial chaos, defying the mysteries of heaven and earth. You can slowly comprehend its profundities in the future, said the ancient shadow. There can be no construction without destruction, and construction after destruction. This is the mystery of the Inai character art, right? Yi Xian slowly raised his head to look at Aeon Yin Yang. Although he had only practiced it once, he could clearly sense how terrifying this taboo technique was. This was a taboo technique that allowed one to rise from death, and then return from life to death. If Yi Xian's speculations were correct, this technique could be considered a life-saving technique. When one fell into a hopeless situation, or was on the verge of death, the reverse symbol art could allow one to live a second life, achieving the astonishing effect of reversing life and death. A strange light flashed through Aeon Yin Yang's fierce eyes, and then he slowly nodded. You are very clever. The reverse symbol art truly is a taboo technique capable of reversing life and death. However, I must warn you that reversing the mysteries of primordial chaos is not something the chaos verse can tolerate. That is why the reverse symbol art is known as a taboo technique. In addition, it is extremely difficult to cultivate. Even if you succeed, you may not be able to reverse life and death. That will depend on your own karmic luck. Many thanks for your generosity, Senior, Yi Xian said humbly. There is no need to thank me. You and I are only exchanging for equal value, Aeon Yin Yang said indifferently. He had always regarded Yi Xian as an enemy on the same level as himself. Although Yi Xian was currently very weak, he believed that Yi Xian would definitely be on the same level as him in the future. This was only a matter of time. In fact, the most important reason why Aeon Yin Yang didn't want to teach Yi Xian his own taboo technique was because the two of them would inevitably fight in the future. If Yi Xian learned too many of his techniques, it would be extremely disadvantageous for Aeon Yin Yang. It wasn't that Aeon Yin Yang was narrow-minded, but that he knew very well how terrifying the person who had fought him in the long river of time was. Even he felt extremely heavy pressure when facing him. Since Senior is willing to exchange for equal value, I have two other great techniques here. I wonder if Senior is interested? Yi Xian's eyes turned as he hurriedly struck while the iron was hot. As Yi Xian spoke, he directly sent two jade talismans towards Aeon Yin Yang. They were the Tribulation Transcender technique and the Tribulation Transcender Devour technique that he had already prepared. You? Aeon Yin Yang was startled, and his aura suddenly became extremely strange. He didn't expect Yi Xian to be so greedy. He wasn't satisfied with learning the reverse symbol art, and was even greedy for other great taboo techniques. Aeon Yin Yang originally wanted to refuse, but the Tribulation Transcender technique and the Tribulation Transcender Devour were two heaven-defying great techniques that really tempted him. This also made him hesitate. Alright, I'll exchange for one with you. Aeon Yin Yang didn't hesitate for too long, and directly accepted the Tribulation Transcender Devour. As for the Tribulation Transcender technique, he casually returned it to Yi Xian. Although he was also very interested in the Tribulation Transcender technique, this great taboo technique wasn't essential to him. Moreover, teaching Yi Xian two great taboo techniques was already Aeon Yin Yang's limit. If Yi Xian learned three great taboo techniques, Aeon Yin Yang definitely didn't want to see the result. What happened next was very simple. In exchange, Yi Xian chose another great taboo technique. This time, the taboo technique Yi Xian chose was the attack character technique. Attack. When Yi Xian chose the attack symbol art, Aeon Yin Yang regretted exchanging it with Yi Xian. This was because the attack symbol art was the second greatest taboo technique in history. It was an extremely terrifying great taboo technique. When Aeon Yin Yang had swept away the 10 strongest experts and 9 great star masters, he had relied on this attack symbol art. Without this attack symbol art, even if his cultivation surpassed the strongest of all time, it would have been impossible for him to be a match for the 10 strongest experts and 9 great star masters. Attack symbol art. It was known as the third greatest offensive technique of all time. Once this technique was used, its attacks would be fierce, and it would have the terrifying power to fight across realms. Within the same realm, it could be called invincible. This technique had the same effect as the Tribulation Transcender transformation. However, while the Tribulation Transcender transformation increased one's cultivation, the attack symbol art increased one's combat strength. It allowed the user to release an attack with the power of an ancient era. What was the power of an ancient era? To make a simple analogy, every great art was like a saber without a sharp edge, and the attack character formula was a whetstone that could sharpen any great art to the extreme. Every slash of the saber could unleash one's extreme strength. When Yi Xian obtained the attack symbol art, he was extremely excited. If he combined it with his cultivation and the Tribulation Transcender transformation, killing people across realms would be as simple as drinking water. Chapter 1331. Remember, although the attack character formula is extremely overbearing and can be called the third greatest offensive technique of all time, this forbidden technique consumes a lot of cultivation. It's best not to use it unless it's a life and death situation. Otherwise, your body will be sucked dry, Eternal Shadow warned in a cold voice. Eternal Shadow was in a very bad mood. His 2 great techniques had been learned by Yi Xian, and he felt extremely pained. Fortunately, he also learned the Tribulation Transcender transformation and Tribulation Transcender Devour, so he didn't suffer a loss. This made him feel somewhat comforted. Time flowed by, and another 30,000 years passed. Yi Xian had barely grasped the 2 great taboo techniques in his hands. The 8 supreme powers within his body had become increasingly scarce under the devouring of the Tribulation Transcender Devour. They had all turned into nourishment for the heaven-burying technique, causing his cultivation to reach a terrifying level. Boom! Yi Xian's body erupted with supreme yang energy. On this day, 30,000 years later, he finally stepped into the yang birth realm. The 8 supreme powers within his body had all turned into nothingness, and were completely refined by his Tribulation Transcender Devour. The heaven burial technique also emitted a terrifying gray light. Rumble! The 12 primal chaos worlds rippled out, transforming into 12 primal chaos universes that rotated behind Yi Xian. These 12 primal chaos universes began to emit strands of gray light, and the 12 primal chaos stars seemed to be connected together. At this moment, an extremely terrifying change was taking place. Change! Yi Xian roared, and the Tribulation Transcender transformation that he hadn't used for a long time was displayed. His aura suddenly rose, and the 12 chaotic stars rotated with a roar. The surrounding mountains and rivers twisted and collapsed, faintly showing signs of spreading in all directions. Attack! Qi! Yi Xian pointed his sword at the sky and destroyed the stars. Yi Xian pointed his finger at the primal chaos universe. The heaven-burying light pierced through the starry sky, and a star hanging in the primal chaos universe instantly turned into ashes. Even the star field where the great desolate world was located trembled slightly. This attack completely surpassed the power of the Yang Birth realm. Even a half-step path-seeking realm expert might not be able to display such terrifying combat strength. At this moment, Yi Xian had ascended to the extreme. He had finally completed the most crucial transformation. His cultivation had stepped into the Yang Birth realm, and he had also learned 2 great forbidden arts of Eternal Shadow. Moreover, both the chaotic 12 Yuanhui worlds and the Heaven's Burial art that he had created had reached an unimaginable level at this moment. At this moment, Yi Xian's battle prowess was no longer the same as before. Even the strongest seeds like Lu Yaoxing would not be able to withstand a single blow from him. He would leave them far behind. 12 Yuanhui World. Aeon Shadow strolled out of the valley, staring at Yi Xian with a pair of fierce eyes. He then shook his head and said, "Although the 12 Yuanhui realms are unique, they are nothing more than that. If you want to be the one to open the gates of reincarnation, you will have to destroy your 12 Yuanhui realms. You will truly have nothing to do with the Chaos Verse." At this point, Eternal Shadow paused for a moment, as if he had thought of something. His scarlet eyes flickered as he muttered. After all, he also created the 12 Yuanhui worlds back then, but in the end, destroy my own world. Yi Xian had been in high spirits after his cultivation had skyrocketed, but when he heard Aeon Shadow's words, his excitement abruptly cooled. If his own world was destroyed, his cultivation would be crippled as well. That would be equivalent to crippling his great Dao origin. Yi Xian simply couldn't imagine such a thing happening. Seize creation, turn yin yang, step into Dao seeking, and become immortal, Aeon Shadow said coldly. Once you step into the undying realm, you'll be faced with a choice. Do you want to destroy your own world, or merge it with your body? If you choose the latter, you'll have a chance to become the strongest in history. If you choose the former, you'll be in danger of dying, but you'll also have a chance to open the gate of reincarnation. However, you have just stepped into the Yang Birth realm, and haven't even reached the half-step Dao-seeking realm. You are still some distance away from the immortal realm. Consider it carefully, Aeon Shadow said in a low voice. I understand, Yi Xian nodded gravely. The 3 realms of creation, the 2 realms of yin and yang, and the 3 realms of Dao seeking were all part of the process of improving oneself and perfecting one's world. When Yi Xian stepped into the immortal realm, he would have to make a choice. Would he choose to merge his own world with his own body or destroy it? For others, this was a difficult problem that didn't even need to think about. Naturally, they would have to become one with the world, and then chase after the title of strongest throughout history. However, ever since Yi Xian had seen many great secrets and seen Aeon Shadow before him, his goal was no longer to become the strongest throughout history. As for how to choose, Yi Xian had already made his choice. He wasn't someone who was willing to fall behind others, and he didn't believe Aeon Shadow would point him to a dead end. If Aeon Shadow wanted to harm him, it would be easy for him to kill him now. Moreover, from Aeon Shadow's words, Yi Xian learned a secret. In the past, there had been another person who had opened up the 12 Yuanhui worlds like him. But in the end, he didn't have a good ending. Yi Xian gradually calmed down and suppressed these troubled thoughts. He cupped his hands and bowed to Aeon Shadow. Senior, thank you for your guidance over the past few days. I would like to bid you farewell today. Aeon Shadow seemed to have expected Yi Xian's departure. He looked at Yi Xian indifferently and said, If you return to the 5 regions of chaos now, aren't you afraid that the strongest throughout history will suppress you? They wouldn't dare. Yi Xian smiled slightly. All right. Aeon Shadow didn't say much. He didn't intend to force Yi Xian to stay. Even if he was willing to guide Yi Xian's cultivation, Yi Xian wouldn't be able to become the person he wanted if he only cultivated in seclusion. I'll wait for you here at the origin of chaos. I hope you won't disappoint me. The ancient shadow turned around and left, while Gai Tianyuan gave Yi Xian a deep glance. His eyes revealed a trace of helplessness, and he could only follow the ancient shadow back to the colonel. I'll be back. Yi Xian murmured, a deep glint in his eyes. He took a step forward and vanished. At this moment, Yi Xian's cultivation had already stepped into the Yang Birth realm, which was an entire realm higher than the strongest seeds. He also had 2 great taboo techniques, so whether it was his own heaven-burying technique, or his various techniques and abilities, they had all been refined to the extreme. His era had finally begun. He was about to embark on his journey, and open up an era of invincibility that belonged only to him. What strongest seeds? What divine sons of great sex? What world-shaking monsters? Right now, Yi Xian had the confidence to sweep through all his enemies. No matter who it was, they would be suppressed before him. Seize good fortune, turn yin and yang, step into Dao seeking, and become immortal. After the yin and yang realms came the half-step to Tao seeking. After that came the 3 realms of Tao seeking. This was also a process that led to the immortal realm. The 3 realms of Tao seeking were the Tao seeking realm, the Tao comprehending realm, and the Tao merging realm. After the 3 realms of Tao seeking, one would enter the immortal realm, which was the sect master level. Chapter 1332. It was the untainted world. In the sky, Yi Xian was slowly walking forward. With his current cultivation, he only needed a thought to travel through the great desolate lands to reach the place he wanted to go. The untainted world used to be huge in his eyes, but compared to the chaotic world, it was just a drop in the ocean. Now that he was back, Yi Xian wanted to see his old friends. He wondered how their cultivation was after millions of years, and what the celestial court looked like now. Moreover, many of his old friends were buried in the yellow soil. Now that he was back, he should pay his respects to them. With his thoughts drifting, Yi Xian walked according to the memory in his mind. The first place he wanted to go was the Bir Fengsuan Mountain, because there were people he needed to pay his respects to there. The Bir Fengsuan Mountain, Patriarch Subhuti was meditating. After millions of years, his cultivation base had risen to the great holy level, and he had passed the chaos holy tribulation without any mishap. Over the past millions of years, he had cultivated his body and mind, and was almost unrivaled in the untainted world. He was peaceful, and did not like to fight with others, so he had a sense of detachment. Over the past millions of years, he had taught many disciples, and each of them had become famous in the untainted world. Many of them had joined the celestial court, and were all overlords. Master. A young girl knelt in front of Subhuti, with a look of adoration. She had a strand of golden hair on her temples. Apparently she was not a human but a demon. How's your learning of the somersault cloud? Subhuti opened his eyes slowly, and looked at the girl with a kind smile. Master, I've learned the somersault cloud. When can you teach me the 72 earthly fiend transformations? The girl's eyes sparkled with hope. There's no hurry. When you can pull out the Jingu Bang, I'll teach you the 72 transformations. Subhuti smiled. I've reached the level of primordial unity golden immortal. I'm sure I can pull out the Jingu Bang. Please help me, master. The girl scratched her ears and cheeks anxiously. Looking at the girl in front of him, Subhuti's eyes were in a trance, as if he was looking at his arrogant disciple. All right, then come with me. Patriarch Subhuti brought the girl to the back of the mountain, where his disciple and weapon were buried. Back of the mountain. From time to time, there would be birds flying by and chirping sounds could be heard. There were even some spirit beasts flying by, and roaring sounds could be heard from time to time. A cenotaph was piled up with yellow soil. A slender figure was standing in front of the cenotaph. The afterglow of the setting sun made his shadow very long. The chirping of the surrounding birds and beasts gradually quieted down. Teacher, you've always told me that eldest senior brother was known as the great sage, heaven's equal. When Subhuti brought the girl to the top of the mountain, the girl's words came to an abrupt halt. The figure in front of the tomb was too serene, and it instantly affected her. In the next moment, Subhuti's expression changed abruptly. His hair and beard turned into barbs, and his aura of a great sage erupted. He could not sense any aura from the figure in front of him. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have noticed that someone had sneaked in. Subhuti was shocked. He did not dare to say that he was invincible in the entire eldritch world, but there was absolutely no one who could surpass him. Yet, someone had managed to sneak into his orthodoxy without him noticing. Just this cultivation alone was enough to make him shudder. Who are you, fellow Taoist? Subhuti's expression was grave, because the figure in front of him was holding the Jingu Bang, the divine weapon that his disciple was proud of. How dare you, villain? Put down my eldest senior brother's weapon. Before Subhuti could make a move, the girl had already shouted. She stepped on a golden cloud and charged toward the figure. At the same time, she was chanting, trying to cast a spell to capture the figure. Don't be reckless. Subhuti's expression changed. He wanted to stop the girl's reckless behavior, but it was too late. Eldest senior brother? The figure in front of the tomb murmured. He gently turned around with the Jingu Bang in his hand. He did not respond to the girl's spell. When he opened his eyes, the spell disappeared without a trace. The girl staggered and almost fell in front of him. Wise stone monkey. When Yi Xian's gaze fell onto the young girl, a trace of brilliance flashed through his eyes. This was because the body of the young girl in front of him was actually exactly the same as Sun Wukong's. They were both one of the 4 primal chaos monkeys, the wise stone monkey. Let me go, villain. The girl was imprisoned in midair. She shouted at Yi Xian, but there was also fear in her eyes. She was a primordial unity golden immortal, but she did not even know how she was restrained. You are? Suddenly a trembling voice was heard. Patriarch Subhoodie appeared in front of the girl in an instant, looking at Yi Xian with great shock. We haven't seen each other for millions of years. How are you, Patriarch? Yi Xian looked at his old friend, who was also Sun Wukong's master. Although his cultivation was much higher than Yi Xian's, he still had to show due respect. Yi Xian! Subhoodie exclaimed in surprise. He could not believe his eyes. After millions of years, he could not believe that Yi Xian would reappear in front of him. Didn't you go to the chaotic world with Yuan Ling? Why? Subhoodie asked in a trembling voice. It's a long story. Yi Xian sighed and lifted the girl's restriction. He then threw the Jingu Bang to the girl and said, The Jingu Bang is my elder brother's weapon. You share the same origin as him, and are of the wise stone monkey bloodline. Don't disgrace his name in the future. Who are you? I don't want you to preach to me. The girl was unruly and stared at Yi Xian angrily. Apparently, she was not a stingy person. Niankong, don't be unreasonable. Patriarch Subhoodie rebuked angrily. The girl was startled and felt wronged. She had never seen her teacher lose his temper like this before. It doesn't matter. Seeing her reminds me of my elder brother Sun Wukong. They are free and unrestrained. It's good, Yi Xian said with a smile. Alas, don't mention it. This disciple of mine is very similar to Sun Wukong. Otherwise, I would not have accepted her as my disciple out of compassion. Patriarch Subhoodie sighed helplessly. Yi Xian, why are you back? How are Yuan Ling and the others? Subhoodie changed the topic. After all, he had chosen to stay in the untainted land. In fact, he regretted his choice. Now that Yi Xian had returned, he naturally wanted to ask about Yuan Ling and Luo Ho. Yi Xian didn't hide anything and briefly recounted everyone's experiences. This caused Subhoodie to sigh endlessly, while the young girl's eyes lit up when she heard this. Chapter 1333. I just happened to come back to the Eldritch Wilderness to pay my respects to Brother Wukong. I'll be leaving soon, Yi Xian said softly. Sigh. Patriarch Subhoodie let out a long sigh. Your world is no longer limited to the Eldritch Wilderness. The chaotic universe is your stage. I wonder when we'll meet again. Senior Brother Yi. Can I call you Senior Brother Yi? Suddenly, the girl carefully interjected and looked at Yi Xian with sparkling eyes. Of course. Wukong is my elder brother. According to seniority, you can indeed call me Senior Brother, Yi Xian said with a smile. Senior Brother Yi. I've always heard Master talking about how powerful Senior Brother Wukong is. Who's more powerful between you and Senior Brother Wukong? The girl asked curiously. This? Yi Xian was stunned, and a wry smile appeared on his face. This question was actually very easy to answer, because it was obvious. However, Yi Xian still thought for a moment and said, if eldest brother was still here, then with his talent, he definitely wouldn't be inferior to me. Moreover, if it wasn't for eldest brother back then, there wouldn't be the Yi Xian of today. Little friend, you're too modest. Subhoodie sighed. Although he could not see Yi Xian's current cultivation level, Yi Xian was already a great saint when he left. What he faced was a mutated chaotic divine tribulation. After millions of years, Yi Xian had probably reached an unimaginable level. Both senior brothers are so powerful. Senior Brother Yi, can you teach me some Dharma formulations and divine abilities? I want to be as powerful as them, the girl said uneasily. Your brother Wukong's junior sister, so you're my junior sister. Of course, there's no problem, Yi Xian said with a smile. That's great. The girl did not know Yi Xian's cultivation level, but she could feel that Yi Xian was very, very powerful. At this moment she cheered excitedly. "Thank you for nurturing my disciple." Subhuti bowed to Yi Xian. He knew that he didn't have much of a relationship with Yi Xian. Everything was because of Sun Wukong. Yi Xian only agreed to the girl's request because of Sun Wukong. "Patriarch, there's no need to be so courteous. You are Brother Wukong's teacher and also my elder. This is what I should do. Consider it my compensation to Brother Wukong." Yi Xian didn't let Subhuti kowtow, because this was the place where Sun Wukong turned into a 5-colored divine stone. Yi Xian had never forgotten this place. Chanting the Great Tao and passing on the teachings for 3 days, Yi Xian stayed in Fengsuen Mountain for 3 days to teach the girl. Naturally, Subhuti accompanied him. In fact, to a large extent, Yi Xian was also teaching Subhuti. After all, Subhuti couldn't beg Yi Xian because of his face. Yi Xian naturally had to consider Subhuti's face. "Here's a bottle of 3 yuan pills. It's enough for Patriarch to steadily step into the Saint King realm." On the day Yi Xian left, he left behind a bottle of pills and flew away. Watching Yi Xian disappear into the horizon, the girl tugged at the corner of Subhuti's clothes and said in confusion, "Master, why do I feel like you're very afraid of him? Even your tone of voice is very unnatural." Upon hearing the girl's words, Subhuti's face turned red. He was not afraid of Yi Xian, but he knew what Yi Xian had gone through in the past and what cultivation level he was at now. It was like a sheep and a tiger. Although the tiger was very close to the sheep and didn't have any intention of harming it, the sheep was still very afraid, because this was the natural chasm between the strong and the weak. It was simply impossible to cross. To put it bluntly, it was the coercion of the superior to the inferior. Even if Yi Xian had restrained his Yangsheng realm aura, Subhuti could still feel the great pressure. "Don't talk nonsense. Little friend Yi is Wukong's brother. Why would I be afraid of him?" Subhuti's face turned red, and he gave the girl a hard slap with his ruler. The girl immediately screamed and begged for mercy. On the other side, Yi Xian was strolling in the sky, heading in the direction of the Celestial Court. He wanted to go back to the Celestial Court to take a look, and then he planned to return to the chaotic world, because he had many more important things to do. However, after staying in Fengsuen Mountain for 3 days, Yi Xian really felt what it meant to be lonely at the top. A feeling of loneliness lingered in his heart. In the past, Subhuti had treated him as a fellow Taoist, and the two of them had treated each other as equals. However, when they met again today, Yi Xian could clearly feel the fear in Subhuti's heart. Subhuti had been very careful in his conversation with him in the past 3 days, for fear of offending him. Yi Xian also finally understood that when a person was at the top, the people and things of the past were already in the past. There was already a difference between the strong and the weak when talking to someone who was not at the same level. Although Yi Xian had always understood this truth, when he personally experienced it, he still felt a little lonely. He also understood the saying, that it was lonely at the top. "Stop!" When Yi Xian came to the southern heavenly gate unconsciously, a loud shout woke him up. He saw 2 golden-armored celestial generals blocking his way, looking at him angrily and majestically. Looking at the 2 celestial generals in front of him, Yi Xian did not know them at all. Obviously, after millions of years, the 4 heavenly kings guarding the southern heavenly gate had changed. "May I know who you are, and why have you come to the celestial court?" One of the golden-armored celestial generals looked at Yi Xian in confusion. He opened his heavenly eyes to observe Yi Xian's cultivation, but to his surprise, he could not see through Yi Xian's cultivation, as if he was standing in front of a mass of air. "Is Kong Xian in the celestial court?" Yi Xian asked calmly. "How dare you call the old celestial emperor by his name?" The 2 celestial generals were furious. They raised their weapons and looked at Yi Xian with extremely unfriendly eyes. The old celestial emperor? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. He remembered that he had passed the position of celestial emperor to Kong Xian before he left. How did Kong Xian become the old celestial emperor after millions of years? If Kong Xian is the old celestial emperor, then who is the current celestial emperor? Yi Xian asked curiously. Looking at Yi Xian's puzzled expression, the two golden-armored celestial generals looked at each other. Could he be a sage-to-be who had not appeared for a long time? Otherwise, how could he not know who the current celestial emperor was? The current ruler of the untainted land is Empress Qing Xian. One of the golden-armored celestial generals said majestically. Empress Qing Xian? Hearing this name, Yi Xian felt that it was familiar, but he could not remember where he had heard it. Who was making a racket at the southern heavenly gate? Suddenly a cold voice sounded. An old man in a white immortal robe walked over slowly. The two celestial generals' expressions changed, and they hurriedly bowed to greet the old man. Sage-to-be Tai Bai. It was this Taoist who called the old celestial emperor by his name. We scolded him and disturbed your cultivation. Please don't blame us, the two golden-armored celestial generals said fearfully. Venus Tai Bai? Looking at the white-robed old man, Yi Xian smiled. He did not expect that after millions of years, Venus Tai Bai had only cultivated to the sage-to-be realm, and was still an official of the celestial court. How dare you call me by my name? Where did you come from, wild Taoist, could it be? Venus Tai Bai shouted and looked at Yi Xian. He was the most senior official of the celestial court. Even Empress Qing Xian had to be courteous to him. He had not heard anyone call him by his name for a long time. However, when Tai Bai Jingxing saw Yi Xian, his berating voice abruptly stopped, and a perplexed expression gradually appeared on his face. You are? After a full 10 breaths of time, Tai Bai Jingxing's face gradually turned red. His eyes trembled as he looked at Yi Xian, and he unconsciously took 3 steps back. You don't recognize me after not seeing me for millions of years? Yi Xian lightly smiled. Chapter 1334. Boom. Tai Bai Jingxing stood stiffly on the ground like a clay sculpture. However, his body was trembling slightly, and the arrogance in his eyes had disappeared without a trace. All that was left was endless fear and shock. Celestial Master? Plop. Under the horrified gaze of the two golden-armored heavenly generals, Venus Tai Bai knelt down and kowtowed to Yi Xian excitedly, shouting the name of Celestial Master. Tai Bai Sage-to-be, you are? The two golden-armored heavenly generals were at a loss, and could not believe what they had just seen. Tai Bai Sage-to-be was kneeling to an unknown person. This was simply a fantasy. Although Tai Bai Sage-to-be's cultivation was not top-notch in the celestial court, his seniority were almost unmatched. Even he did not need to kneel when he saw the Empress. Quickly kneel and pay respects to Holy Ancestor Celestial Master. The next moment, Venus Tai Bai scolded with a flushed face, startling the two golden-armored heavenly generals. Although they hurriedly knelt down, they were still in a state of confusion. Holy Ancestor Celestial Master? Yi Xian was slightly stunned, and then a touch of understanding flashed across his eyes. It seemed that this title was given to him by the people of the celestial court after he left the untainted land. Get up. Yi Xian did not care about the red tape. Moreover, he only came back to see an old friend, and did not want to waste too much time because of these red tape. Celestial Master, Old Minister missed you so much. You left for millions of years. Old Minister could not sleep day and night, and wished that he could leave with you. Now I regret it so much. At this moment, Venus Tai Bai no longer had the demeanor of a sage-to-be. He was completely flattering and fawning. He came to Yi Xian with snot and tears running down his face. His words were full of sorrow and sincerity. That's enough. Wipe your tears away. Yi Xian frowned slightly, and a touch of helplessness flashed through his eyes. Tai Bai Jingxing was still as eloquent as before. He used to be his henchman in the celestial court, and now he had returned to his former self. However, Yi Xian also liked people like Venus Tai Bai. This was because Venus Tai Bai was someone who knew how to adapt to the situation. If Venus Tai Bai hadn't betrayed the Jade Emperor back then, it would have been quite troublesome for him to kill the Jade Emperor. Looking at Yi Xian's furrowed brows, Venus Tai Bai smiled awkwardly, then hurriedly led the way for Yi Xian. She even put on a fawning appearance. Looking at Venus Tai Bai's servile attitude, the two golden-armored heavenly generals were stunned speechless. This was not the high and mighty sage-to-be Venus Tai Bai. At this moment, He was even inferior to the heavenly generals who guarded the gate. However, the two golden-armored heavenly generals looked at each other, and a touch of fear flashed through their eyes. Someone who could make Sage to be Venus Taibai bow to her must have an unimaginable background. 33 levels of heaven. Yi Xian strolled on the Rainbow Bridge, as if he was taking a leisurely stroll in the courtyard. There were celestial islands and pavilions as far as the eye could see. There were even red-crowned cranes flying by on both sides of the Rainbow Bridge. It gave the celestial court a sense of stability and prosperity. The past is like smoke, passing day and night. I didn't expect that after millions of years, the celestial court would still be the same as before I left. Not much has changed, Yi Xian whispered softly. You may not know, Celestial Master, but after you left, Celestial Emperor Kong Xian issued a decree that no one was to damage the celestial court. This was so that when you returned one day, you would still be able to see the celestial court in the past, Venus Taibai hurriedly reported. Brother Kong Xian is very considerate. May I know where he is now, and who is Empress Qing Xian? Yi Xian asked. Celestial Emperor Kong Xian has been in seclusion for many years. As for Empress Qing Xian, Venus Taibai looked strangely at Yi Xian, and did not continue speaking. With Yi Xian's intelligence, how could he not feel the coldness in Venus Taibai's eyes? This made him slightly startled, and he asked, Is this person related to me? Celestial Master, you really don't remember? Venus Taibai smiled bitterly. Yi Xian's memory could be said to be very good. Even after millions of years, he could still remember what happened in the past. However, he really could not remember how he was related to Empress Qing Xian. Looking at Yi Xian's frown, Venus Taibai knew that Yi Xian really could not remember. This made him want to explain the whole story. But a rainbow bridge had already spread out from the Celestial Emperor Palace, and 81 bells rang throughout the celestial court. Disciple Qing Xian welcomes teacher back to the celestial court. Rumble! Countless immortal lights shot out from the heavenly Emperor Palace, as a large number of immortals rushed over from all directions. They saw an azure-clothed woman with a peerless appearance leading the immortals of the heavenly court towards Yi Xian. Welcome back to the celestial court, Celestial Master Saintly Ancestor. The celestial court was shaken. When Yi Xian returned to the celestial court, Venus Taibai had already sent the news to the Celestial Emperor Palace. This also made Empress Qing Xian lead the celestial court immortal demon kings to welcome him. You are? Looking at the woman in green, Yi Xian vaguely felt that she was somewhat familiar, and then suddenly understood. You are that little girl from back then? Yi Xian said with a smile. He finally remembered that when he returned to the untainted land, he had taken a little girl as his disciple, and even taught her some dharma. It was only because the little girl was very similar to Gu Xiaoxiao that he felt compassion for her. He did not expect that now, millions of years later, the disciple he casually took in back then would now become the master of the celestial court. No wonder he could not remember this person at first. Teacher! The little girl from back then had grown up, and her face no longer had that immature look. She knelt at the feet of Yi Xian, and sincerely kowtowed 3 times to Yi Xian. If teacher did not nurture me back then, there would not be Qing Xian today. Disciple kowtows to you. Good. Yi Xian said the word good 3 times in a row. Only then did Gu Qing Xian get up, but she was obviously very uneasy. This was because although she was Yi Xian's disciple in name, the two of them did not have much interaction. Moreover, Gu Qing Xian would never forget how terrifying her teacher was back then. The so-called sage-to-be and heavenly path sages all died tragically in his hands. This was something she had seen with her own eyes. Heavenly Lord! The demonic wind of heaven and earth blew, and a dozen figures appeared in front of Yi Xian in an instant, and then with a plop, they knelt on the ground. They were the sky-swallowing toad, and the others who had followed Yi Xian before. Not only these old demon kings, but in the next moment, the immortals of the Jie sect also arrived in an instant. The leader was Shun Gongbao, who had not been seen for a long time, and many other old immortals of the Jie sect. They had not seen Yi Xian for millions of years. When these people saw him, they all knelt on the ground, and some even cried excitedly. Suddenly, The whole celestial court became extremely noisy. Looking at the demon kings and immortals who used to be his subordinates, Yi Xian was also very emotional. He reminisced about the past with them one by one, while Empress Qing Xian and the other immortals carefully accompanied him, and even their breathing was very careful. It should be known that these demon kings and immortals were all sage to be. They were the old antiques of the celestial court, and had not been seen in the world for millions of years. Unexpectedly, they all came out of their own dojos today to welcome the Holy Ancestor Heavenly Lord. Chapter 1335. It was no wonder that the immortals of the celestial court were shocked. After all, they were new and had not experienced what happened back then, nor had they seen Yi Xian in person. Otherwise, they would have known why these old demon kings and immortals were so excited. Master, I have prepared a feast of peaches to welcome you back. Empress Qing Xian bowed to Yi Xian. No need. I just want to catch up with my old brothers. Now that the celestial court is under your control, you can go do what you need to do. Yi Xian was a heartless person, and it could be said that he was heartless in certain matters. Although Gu Qingxian was a disciple that he casually accepted back then, Yi Xian didn't have any master-disciple relationship with her. Moreover, the celestial court was now filled with new blood. He only came back to see his old friends. As for these immortals and demon kings who rose to power in the future, he naturally did not need to deal with them. Let's go. Buzz. Yi Xian waved his hand in the air. The power of time and space flowed and covered him and the old minister. In the next moment, all of them disappeared from the celestial court. This is the legendary power of time and space. Empress Qing Xian was shocked to see Yi Xian leading the old demon kings and immortals away. The immortals and demon kings behind her also gasped. This was because no one saw how Yi Xian and the rest disappeared. Empress, this person's cultivation is very strong. We have to take precautions. An immortal official lowered his voice and said to Empress Qing Xian. Obviously, Yi Xian's return had put a lot of pressure on them. If Yi Xian wanted to take back the celestial emperor's throne, what would they do in the future? How dare you slander my master? The Qing Xian empress's expression changed abruptly. With a flip of her slender hand, she smashed the immortal official's soul into nothingness. This also caused the other immortals and demon kings' expressions to change. They didn't know why the empress would be so ruthless towards her trusted aide. Remember, it was Holy Ancestor who created the Supreme Celestial Court. Without him, the Celestial Court would not have been able to unify the untainted land. If anyone dares to disobey me, I will definitely make him unable to reincarnate. Empress Qing Xian scolded coldly. We wouldn't dare, Your Majesty, please calm down. The immortal and monster kings hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed, and this small interlude passed just like that. Jade Lake. A group of monsters and ancient immortals were by his side. All of them were old monsters and immortals from millions of years ago. A mystic light mirror appeared above the Jade Lake, showing the scene of Empress Qing Xian beating up the immortal official. Fortunately, Qing Xian girl is not blinded by power. Otherwise, I would definitely destroy these little bastards. After millions of years, the Rock Demon King had already cultivated to the 9th heaven of Small Saint Realm. He was only one step away from crossing the chaotic divine tribulation. He stared fiercely at the juniors in the mystic light mirror, with contempt in his eyes. There is no need for Brother Rock Demon to do anything. These little bastards of the later generations are getting more and more outrageous. I, the sky-swallowing toad, will directly swallow all of them. When the time comes, we will follow the Holy Ancestor and lead the celestial court to the chaotic world. Isn't this a great thing in life? The sky-swallowing toad laughed wildly. All right, we have already lived for millions of years. Why are we competing with these juniors? Today the Holy Ancestor has returned. We will definitely drink until we are drunk. Shen Gongbao laughed and said. A worthy younger brother. I think Qing Xian girl can lead the entire celestial court well. Otherwise, I would not have passed the position of celestial emperor to her. In the central seat, Kong Xian and Yi Xian sat side by side. After millions of years, Kong Xian had already reached the Great Saint Realm. This time, When he heard that Yi Xian had returned, he hurriedly woke up from his seclusion. Don't worry, elder brother. How can I take the words of some juniors to heart? Moreover, the untainted land is too small. This time, I came back to see my old friends, Yi Xian said with a smile. Power was a good thing. It could blind the wisdom of many people. After millions of years, the celestial court had been injected with new blood. The older generation naturally withdrew from the stage of history. However, as long as the celestial court was not in chaos, Yi Xian naturally did not pay attention to these juniors. After all, at this moment, whether it was the celestial court or the untainted land, to Yi Xian, they were too insignificant for him to think about. As long as the foundation of the celestial court was still there, no matter how these juniors made trouble, Yi Xian naturally would not take a look at them. On this day, at the Jade Pool, people were exchanging cups and drinking merrily. Yi Xian also had a rare chance to relax. During the banquet, he chatted a lot with Kong Xian. It was not until everyone was drunk that they all dispersed under Kong Xian's command. Lunar Star, under the Tongtian osmanthus tree, Yi Xian and Kong Xian stood side by side. The three cenotaphs were spotless under the moonlight. Yi Xian was also silent at this moment. Fairy Xian's soul was scattered and she died. The moon fairy was killed by me. My martial niece Xueji also died tragically at the hands of Nuwa. I owe these three women. After a full 10 breaths of time, Yi Xian sighed and said, They have passed away. Why are you immersing yourself in the past? Kong Xian comforted him. Yi Xian was not too sad. He just looked at the three cenotaphs quietly, then shook his head and said, There are some things that I need to pay back. This is a debt that I owe, and I will pay it back in the future. In fact, I would like to go to the chaotic world with you and see the wider world outside. Unfortunately, our cultivation is too weak. It seems that we are invincible in the untainted land, but in the chaotic universe that you mentioned, I am afraid that we are not even ants. Kong Xian said weakly, I am used to being alone. If there is really someone to accompany me, I will not be used to it. Yi Xian said with a smile, but there was a sense of loneliness in his words. I know that you are leaving, and I don't know when we will see each other again. But I can promise you that as long as I am alive, the untainted land will be there, and the celestial court will be there. If one day you are the enemy of the whole world, and have no way out, then go back to the untainted land, because this will always be your home, and you will still be the master of the celestial court. Kong Xian said firmly, Way out. Yi Xian looked at the chaotic universe in the distance, and a touch of loneliness flashed across his eyes. It was because there was no way out for him. His path could only be forward, and as long as he took half a step back, he would fall into the abyss. Brother, I have 3 divine techniques, and each of them contains one of my attacks. If the untainted land really encounters a great enemy, these 3 divine techniques will be of help to you. Yi Xian thought about it, and threw 3 jade talismans at Kong Xian. Kong Xian solemnly put them away, knowing that Yi Xian was leaving them as a foundation for the untainted land. Looking at the jade talismans in Kong Xian's hands, Yi Xian frowned slightly, wondering if he should tell Kong Xian about the eternal shadow. However, Yi Xian didn't hesitate for too long. Finally, he said, If there really is a great enemy, these 3 divine techniques won't be able to repel him. Brother, you can go to Broken Mountain and shout for Gai Tianyuan 3 times. He will definitely be able to repel the invaders. Yi Xian thought about it for a long time, but in the end, he still didn't tell Kong Xian about the eternal shadow. However, Gai Tianyuan had become the servant of the eternal shadow, and he was also an immortal realm expert. He should be able to protect the untainted land. I understand. Kong Xian didn't ask who Gai Tianyuan was, but if Yi Xian mentioned him so seriously, he must be an extremely terrifying existence. Brother, farewell. We will meet again if fate wills it. Yi Xian took a step forward. He no longer had any lingering feelings for the great desolate world, and disappeared from Kong Xian's eyes. This was because he wanted to open up an era that belonged to him, Yi Xian, an era that was truly invincible in this world, and belonged only to him. Chapter 1336. 3 months later. Die, all of you. Chi. A gray light penetrated the starry sky of the universe, and hundreds of giant beasts of the starry sky turned into ashes. A terrifying figure came from the end of the starry sky, and a fierce aura flashed across his body. I'm finally back. Yi Xian looked at the chaotic world in front of him with a smile. He activated the power of time and space, and directly turned into a long rainbow, and shuttled back to the Central Territory. After 3 months of space travel, even though Yi Xian's cultivation was already at the Yangxing realm, it still took him 3 months to return to the chaotic world. Fortunately, the return journey was more daunting than dangerous. Even the giant starry sky beasts that had been harassing him had finally given up on chasing him. Qi. Heaven and earth were boundless, and like light and lightning, Yi Xian, who had stepped into the Yangxing realm, was much more powerful than before. His speed was so fast that no one could catch a trace of him. Taoist friend, save me. Suddenly, just as Yi Xian was about to enter the great central region, he heard a panicked voice from behind him, accompanied by a few cold roars of killing. Yi Xian was definitely not a nosy person, and the life and death of others had nothing to do with him. However, this voice was somewhat familiar to him, so he naturally looked towards the source of the voice. Ji Biao. When he saw the fleeing person, Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Wasn't this woman Ji Biao, who was fighting with him at the Heaven Mending Sect's grand ceremony? If Yi Xian remembered correctly, this woman had an elder brother called Ji Zhonglu, and both of them were disciples of the Extreme Emotion Heavenly Palace. Moreover, this woman was a disciple of a supreme orthodoxy, who dared to chase after her. In a split second, Yi Xian thought about a lot of things. However, before Yi Xian could do anything, Ji Biao had already arrived by his side and angrily rebuked the person chasing after her. If you want to kill me, have you asked my senior? Scram! In an instant a cold rebuke was heard. It was a woman in black. Her skin was as white as jade, and her silver hair was scattered behind her head. She looked like an ancient glacier. The long saber in her hand slashed towards Yi Xian. Her cultivation was at the peak of the 3rd level of the creation realm, and there were signs that she was about to step into the extreme Yin realm. Someone from the Undying Heaven Palace? Yi Xian only took a glance at this woman, and he could tell that this black-clothed woman was from the Undying Heavenly Palace. Furthermore, she had cultivated the Undying Immortal Scripture, so she should be a spirit lady of the Undying Heavenly Palace. No wonder Ji Biao was not her opponent. However, Yi Xian felt that something was off. The strongest orthodoxies had never interfered with each other's business. Why were the disciples of these two factions fighting to the death? Moreover, they had appeared in the chaotic cosmos. However, Yi Xian didn't have time to think. The black-clothed woman slashed at him with the intent to take his life. This caused Yi Xian's eyes to narrow as a cruel sneer appeared on his face. Clang! A pair of jade-like fingers, like two pillars that could hold up the sky, gently clamped the long saber between them. A terrifying sound erupted. No matter how the black-clothed woman unleashed her terrifying cultivation, she couldn't pull the long saber out from between Yi Xian's fingers. A mere 3rd-stage creation realm cultivator dares to brandish a saber at me? Yi Xian smiled coldly, his lips curling into a cruel and sinister smile. When the black-clothed woman saw this, she couldn't help but shudder. Senior, who are you? Why are you interfering in the battle between the strongest seeds? Aren't you afraid that the Undying Heavenly Palace will hold you accountable? The black-clothed woman frowned and questioned. She wasn't afraid of Yi Xian's terrifying cultivation. The black-clothed woman wasn't afraid of Yi Xian because she had the backing of a strongest orthodoxy. Even if Yi Xian's cultivation was powerful, he still had to consider the consequences of offending the Undying Heavenly Palace. Are you threatening me? Yi Xian laughed. Suddenly, his laughter was very evil and cruel, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. We're fighting for the position of the strongest seeds. How can you interfere? Let go of me now. Otherwise, when the protectors of my palace arrive, they'll definitely take your life. The black-clothed woman might have been spoiled too much. She didn't know what it meant to have a sinister heart. It would have been better if she hadn't said those words. After saying those words, she was destined to die today. Crack. In the next moment, Yi Xian's face revealed a sinister and cruel expression. His jade-like fingers suddenly exerted force and directly snapped the black-clothed woman's long saber in his hand. Before the black-clothed woman could react, Yi Xian took a step forward and arrived beside her. His 5 fingers suddenly pressed against the black-clothed woman's head as his cold and emotionless voice quietly rang out. If one is ignorant, even the heavens can't save him. Puffed. As soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, he exerted force with his 5 fingers pressed against the woman's head and actually broke her head. He didn't have any intention of showing her any mercy. Roar. Yi Xian's Calamity Transcender technique was activated. Even if he didn't care about this woman's cultivation, no matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. Yi Xian hated such a shameful act of wasting resources. Sizzle. The black-clothed woman's flesh and blood melted. Under the terrifying devouring power of the Calamity Transcender technique, her entire body turned into a skeleton. As a violent astral wind blew, this skeleton turned into ashes and dissipated. Yi Xian exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. His eyes were calm and unperturbed, as if he had just done something very casual. However, when Yi Xian turned around to look for Ji Biao, he found that the other party had already fled without a trace. This made Yi Xian frown slightly. Then he stepped into the Grand Central Territory. To put it bluntly, Yi Xian didn't want to get involved in the battles between these supreme orthodoxies. Even if they fought each other to the death, Yi Xian would just treat it as a joke. However, Ji Biao was a member of the Extreme Emotion Heavenly Palace. As the saying goes, Yi Xian had a past with the Extreme Emotion Heavenly Palace. Yi Xian couldn't just watch Ji Biao die in front of him. This was also the reason why Yi Xian wanted to get involved in this matter. In a nameless mountain range in the Grand Central Territory, ugh! A mouthful of blood spurted from Ji Biao's mouth. Her face was extremely pale. She staggered through the mountain forest with lingering fear on her face from time to time. Fortunately, that person just blocked this witch for me. Otherwise, I would have definitely died in her hands. Ji Biao whispered with lingering fear. However, she was so focused on escaping that she didn't see Yi Xian's face clearly. She only felt that the other party's aura was extremely powerful. He must be an expert in the yin-yang realm. Now that she had escaped from the black-clothed woman's pursuit, she was slightly relieved. However, she was severely injured and needed to return to the Extreme Emotion Heavenly Palace as soon as possible to heal her injuries. I saved your life. Aren't you going to say thank you? Just as Ji Biao was hiding her tracks and shuttling through the mountain forest, a dark figure quietly blocked her path. This also caused Ji Biao to stop in shock. You're that senior just now? After the shock, Ji Biao quickly calmed down. She knew that she had met an expert. She didn't expect that this expert could defeat the black-clothed woman so quickly and even find her. Chapter 1337. Biao thanks Senior for saving my life. My extreme love Heavenly Palace will definitely repay your kindness in the future. Ji Biao seemed to be thanking Yi Xian, but she was also revealing her identity. She wanted to use the name of the Extreme Love Heavenly Palace to intimidate Yi Xian. I'm not a senior, Yi Xian said calmly. The light on his body gradually faded, revealing his original appearance. When Ji Biao saw Yi Xian's face, she was stunned on the spot. Yi Xian, it's you? Ji Biao exclaimed in the next moment, and then there was great excitement in her eyes. Seeing Ji Biao so happy to see him, Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat, and he knew that things were not good. Let's go. Quickly return to the Extreme Love Heavenly Palace with me. Ji Biao quickly came in front of Yi Xian and pulled Yi Xian without hesitation. Her face was full of joy, as if she had found a peerless treasure. Let go. Yi Xian's face turned cold, and his eyes instantly became ruthless. A terrifying force burst out and directly pushed Ji Biao a few steps away. This also made Ji Biao suddenly wake up from her excitement, and she knew that she was a little too excited. Yi Xian, don't misunderstand. It's a decree from the Heavenly Lord of my hall. If I receive news of you, I'll immediately report it. My hall's Heavenly Lord is even looking for you everywhere. Ji Biao quickly explained. Without Ji Biao's explanation, Yi Xian had already guessed this result. This also made him frown slightly. He still didn't know how to deal with the extreme love master. Tell me, what happened in the past 100,000 years? Yi Xian avoided the important matters and directly brought Ji Biao to a secluded valley. The two of them sat down cross-legged. Yi Xian also voiced the doubts in his heart. After all, he had disappeared for more than 100,000 years. He had no idea what the 10 strongest experts and 9 great astral masters had done. Very quickly, Ji Biao quickly explained what had happened over the past 100,000 years, allowing Yi Xian to gradually understand the whole story. At that time, the chaotic world could be said to be in chaos. The battle between the top 10 strongest directly affected the 5 regions of chaos. Just the aura that was released made the creatures in the chaotic world extremely fearful. No one knew what had happened, nor did they know who was fighting in the chaotic starry sky. Fortunately, the battle did not last long, and the entire chaotic world quieted down. However, it didn't take long for the top 10 strongest orthodoxies to pass down supreme decrees. These decrees had only one meaning, and that was to find Yi Xian. No matter who obtained information about Yi Xian, the top 10 strongest orthodoxies would reward them handsomely. Unfortunately, Yi Xian seemed to have evaporated into thin air. No one was able to find any news of him, but everything about him had been dug out. First of all, Yuan Ling and Luo Ho were found by the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace at the first possible moment, and imprisoned within the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace. The other strongest orthodoxies were one step slower. They could only look for Yi Xian's traces everywhere. But in the end, they found nothing. Then a major event that shocked the chaotic world happened. The top 10 strongest experts passed down a decree again, and the Great Path Battle officially began. The so-called Great Path Battle, to put it bluntly, was to compete for the position of the strongest expert in the next Yuan Hui. According to the historical process, the Great Path Battle would officially begin when a Yuan Hui came to an end. However, only 200 million years had passed since the 10th Yuan Hui, and there was still a billion years before the 11th Yuan Hui. At this moment, the top 10 strongest experts announced the start of the Great Path Battle, which was 800 million years earlier than before. It was also because of the decree of the top 10 strongest experts that the entire chaotic world was completely filled with smoke. The disciples of the top orthodoxies came out one after another, and all of them wanted to become the strongest seeded contestants. The chaotic war in the chaotic world, where the various orthodoxies competed, especially the younger generation, could be said to have caused complete chaos in the 5 regions of chaos. This was also the reason why Ji Biao was chased by the black-robed woman just now. It was because the battle between the two was supposed to be a life-and-death battle. Unfortunately, Ji Biao was no match for the woman, so she fled and met Yi Xian, which led to the incident just now. Great Path Battle? They're all looking for me? After listening to Ji Biao's narration, Yi Xian squinted his eyes slightly, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Perhaps others did not understand why the top 10 strongest experts started the Great Path Battle in advance. But to Yi Xian, it was very simple. The Eternal Shadow. Yes, it must be the Eternal Shadow. The top 10 strongest experts had suffered a setback, and were no match for the Eternal Shadow at all. It was as if a shadow had shrouded them. So they wanted to start the Great Path Battle in order to find him, because the top 10 strongest experts knew that he would definitely compete for the title of the strongest of all time in the next Yuan Hui. Moreover, as long as they found him, they would definitely find the Eternal Shadow. Moreover, even without the Eternal Shadow, he had so many secrets that the top 10 strongest experts would not let him go. However, Yi Xian was already prepared for this. Otherwise he would not have returned to the chaotic world. As for how to face the top 10 strongest experts, he already had a way to deal with them. Yi Xian, quickly follow me back to the Extreme Emotion Heavenly Palace. My Heavenly Lord will definitely be able to protect you. Ji Biao looked hopefully at Yi Xian. Are you stupid? Or am I stupid? Yi Xian sneered, patted Ji Biao's shoulder, and strode out of the forest. Hey, where are you going? Looking at Yi Xian leaving without any intention of returning to the Extreme Emotion Palace with her, Ji Biao suddenly became anxious and chased after Yi Xian without caring about her injuries. Eternal blue sky, void travel. The power of time and space rolled in the firmament. Yi Xian strolled in the firmament, and Ji Biao stood beside Yi Xian with a gloomy face, like a little girl who had been wronged. Yi Xian, I warn you, don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you have stepped into the Yangxing realm. Now all the great sects and strongest orthodoxies are looking for you everywhere. If you don't return to the Extreme Emotion Palace with me, no one can protect you. Ji Biao said angrily. Shut up. Do you know how annoying you are? Yi Xian scolded coldly. He did not pity Ji Biao at all because she was a peerless beauty, as if he was scolding his own servant girl. Why, don't go too far. Ji Biao was still a proud girl, so she was naturally unwilling to be scolded by Yi Xian like a servant girl, but there was a faint trace of fear in her eyes. She clearly remembered that Yi Xian's cultivation back then was not even as good as hers, but Yi Xian had cultivated to the Yangxing realm in such a short period of time. This was simply unbelievable to her, and it was even more shocking. After all, most of the strongest seeds were only at the extreme Yin realm, and there might be terrifying Yangxing realm geniuses hidden among them, but no one knew about them. So how did Yi Xian cultivate to the Yangxing realm in such a short period of time? Unfortunately, Ji Biao did not know that Yi Xian was not as simple as the Yangxing realm at the moment. His battle strength was definitely much more terrifying than the Yangxing realm. Hey, where are you going? Ji Biao said angrily when she saw that Yi Xian was ignoring her. Of course I'm going to the Myriad Spirit Palace to have a chat with the Myriad Spirit Palace Lord. Aren't all the strongest of eternity looking for me? Yi Xian's lips curled into a strange smile, but when Ji Biao saw it, she immediately shuddered. Why, are you crazy? After a few breaths, Ji Biao screamed in horror, looking at Yi Xian with an extremely shocked expression. Ji Biao only then realized that the two of them were heading in the direction of the Myriad Spirit Palace. Clearly, Yi Xian was not joking with her at all, and was really going to the Myriad Spirit Palace. Chapter 1338. The vast heavenly palace covered the sky and the sun. The patrolling divine generals flew through the sky. Streaks of spiritual light crisscrossed between heaven and earth. It made people feel great reverence when they looked at it from afar. This was the strongest orthodoxy in the world. This was the land of all spirits. This was the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace, where the ruler of the 10th epoch was located. In front of the heavenly gate, Yi Xian leisurely walked forward. Ji Biao nervously followed with a serious expression on her face. Along the way, she constantly tried to persuade Yi Xian, but even if she had to grind her mouth, Yi Xian still turned a deaf ear to her. Who are you? Boom. The two divine generals guarding the gate were furious. They blocked their path with weapons in their hands. Obviously, Yi Xian and Ji Biao were not from the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace. Naturally, they had to interrogate them. Go and tell the Lord of all spirits that I, Yi Xian, have come to visit, Yi Xian said indifferently. How dare you? How dare you call my lord by his name? The two divine generals' expressions changed. It was because Yi Xian had addressed him too casually. Moreover, who was the lord of all spirits? He was one of the strongest existences in history. How could a brat meet him, just because he wanted to? How troublesome. Yi Xian lightly frowned. He didn't have the time to dawdle with the two guards. This also caused him to take a step forward. A terrifying ripple burst out from his surroundings, and the two guards turned into a bloody mist with a boom. They were already dead to the point where they couldn't be any more dead. You lunatic. This caused Ji Biao to be shocked and furious. One had to know that this was the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace. Not to mention the lord of all spirits. If a random Dao seeking immortal realm existence were to appear, killing Yi Xian would be as easy as taking something from his pocket. Unfortunately, Yi Xian didn't respond to Ji Biao's nervous reprimand. Instead, he walked into the 10,000 spirit heavenly palace leisurely. He was extremely calm from beginning to end. Yi Xian wouldn't risk his life if he didn't have a certain level of confidence. Since he dared to come to the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace, he naturally had his own confidence. Audacious! Who are you? How dare you kill someone from my 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace? Without waiting for Yi Xian to take a few steps, a thunderous roar sounded out. A divine judge charged over with a loud bang, accompanied by a giant palm in the sky. The terrifying might caused even the void to rumble and tremble. You're courting death. Yi Xian didn't even look at who it was. His lips curled into a cold smile as he raised his palm and slapped towards the person. The ray of sky-burying rainbow light pierced through the void and instantly shattered the person's great technique. But this was not the end. The god adjudicator let out a roar of terror, because Yi Xian's attack had not diminished in the slightest, and had already landed on him. Boom! Blood rained down from the sky as the god adjudicator's body exploded. Yi Xian's casual attack was too terrifying. The god adjudicator didn't even have the chance to resist. Even when he was dying, he didn't even have the time to scream, before his soul was scattered between heaven and earth. What kind of Tom, Dick, and Harry wants to die? Then I'll have to fulfill your wish, Yi Xian muttered contemptuously as he continued to walk forward. Killing people was as simple as eating and drinking to him. But Yi Xian's actions directly pierced through the sky. He had killed 3 people from the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace in a row, and immediately attracted the attention of the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. Hundreds of figures instantly shot over from all directions and surrounded Yi Xian and Ji Biao in the center in an instant. How dare you behave so atrociously in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace? An angry rebuke rang out as Dutian god official slowly walked out. The terrifying cultivation of the extreme Yin realm was fully unleashed. He looked at Yi Xian with an extremely sharp and murderous gaze. Go and tell the master of all spirits that I, Yi Xian, am here. Facing the encirclement of hundreds of cultivators, Yi Xian wasn't afraid at all. He only indifferently looked at the heavenly divine official, his words filled with indifference. Yi Xian. Dutian god official was shocked. Only then did he carefully examine Yi Xian's appearance. Sure enough, he found that he looked exactly the same as Yi Xian, one of the 10 most wanted people on the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. We've searched high and low for you, only to find you by chance. We haven't even found you yet, but you've delivered yourself to us. We'll take you down first, and hand you over to the master of all spirits. Dutian god official smiled savagely as he looked at Yi Xian with an extremely excited gaze. As long as he could capture Yi Xian, it would be a great achievement, and he would definitely be rewarded by the master of all spirits. How could he not be excited? Kid, come over here. Dutian god official was so excited that he suddenly stretched out his 5 fingers toward Yi Xian. His extreme Yin realm cultivation erupted, as if he could already foresee that Yi Xian would be suppressed by him. You're really ignorant. Yi Xian frowned slightly. He could not understand one thing. Why were there so many ignorant people in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace? Why did they have to seek their own deaths? Bang! One punch, just one punch. Yi Xian punched out. The heaven-burying fist radiance lit up the entire world and penetrated Dutian god official's chest. Fresh blood splattered on the ground, accompanied by Dutian god official's shrill screams. You're really an ignorant piece of trash. Yi Xian helplessly shook his head as he slowly walked past Dutian divine priest. An extremely terrifying thing happened as well. There was already a large hole in Dutian divine priest's chest, but at this moment, his body gradually melted until it turned into a bloody skeleton that scattered to the ground with crackling sounds. Silence! Silence! A deathly silence. When this scene appeared, the faces of the hundreds of cultivators surrounding Yi Xian turned deathly pale. Everyone unconsciously retreated as they looked at Yi Xian with eyes filled with fear. No one saw how Dutian god official died. They only saw a flash of light, and then Dutian god official was defeated and turned into a skeleton. The wind was calm, and the clouds were not stained by dust. Yi Xian strolled forward, and Ji Biao followed behind him numbly. She seemed to have become numb to Yi Xian's crazy killing. The hundreds of cultivators surrounding the two of them kept retreating with Yi Xian's footsteps. But at this moment, a spiritual light streaked across the sky and suddenly blocked Yi Xian's path. Little Jiu. The person who came was dressed in purple. She looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. She opened her mouth slightly, and if one listened carefully, one would notice that her voice was trembling. Purple Spirit, the maid beside Master of all Spirits. She was also a foolish woman, who had once been used by Yi Xian. Purple Spirit's appearance surprised Yi Xian, but it was only a surprise. Yi Xian stopped and looked at Purple Spirit indifferently. I was never Little Jiu. Back then, I was just hiding my identity. Why did you use me? Purple Spirit's expression was complicated, and her hands were slightly clenched. It's not about using or not. If you think I was using you, then I was using you. Yi Xian didn't want to be too entangled with Purple Spirit. This woman had helped him a lot in the past, but the two of them couldn't be friends. Yi Xian understood this very well. Chapter 1339. Why did you lie to me? Violet Spirit suddenly blurted out. She had bitten her lips so hard that they bled. Her entire body was trembling. She wanted to control her emotions and calm herself down, but she found that she couldn't do it. Because you're a silly woman. You believe everything I say. If I didn't lie to you, how could I hide in the 10,000 Spirit Palace? Women were very troublesome creatures. Yi Xian hated dealing with women. Although he knew that he had wronged this silly woman, the best solution was to cut the Gordian knot. If he kept pestering her, he would only find trouble for himself. I'll kill you. Boom. Violet Spirit roared in anger. Her cultivation of the extreme Yin realm suddenly erupted. Violet Spirit clear water sword appeared in her hand. Suddenly, Tongtian sword radiance shot towards Yi Xian. If it was in the past, Yi Xian would have turned around and left without saying a word in the face of Violet Spirit's furious sword strike. But now that his cultivation had stepped into the Yang Birth realm, his combat strength was even more terrifying and monstrous. He didn't dare to say that he could sweep through the entire younger generation. But there weren't many people who were his match. Clang! Clang! With a flick of his finger, Yi Xian lightly flicked his finger onto the sword. As the sword hummed and trembled, Violet Spirit was sent flying along with her sword. Fortunately, Yi Xian had shown mercy. He didn't intend to take Violet Spirit's life. He only sent her flying. You're no match for me. Take me to the Lord of 10,000 Spirit Palace. Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. His words were indifferent. I'll kill you, you bastard. Once Violet Spirit was defeated, her face was filled with extreme shame and anger. She once again raised her sword and charged towards Yi Xian. Sword lights filled the sky as they howled in all directions. The extreme yin qi that exploded in the air crazily scurried about. Clang! A pair of jade fingers gently clamped the sword. No matter how powerful Violet Spirit's cultivation was, the spiritual sword in her hand couldn't move an inch. I've already said that you're no match for me. If you continue to pester me, then don't blame me for being ruthless, Yi Xian said coldly. Damn it, you heartless bastard. In the face of Yi Xian's words, Violet Spirit cried out in shame and anger. She had never imagined that in such a short period of time, Yi Xian, who had once needed her protection, would now completely surpass her. She was actually unable to do anything to Yi Xian. You're really troublesome. Yi Xian frowned, perhaps because he remembered Violet Spirit's affection for him back then. He casually cast a star rune grand art, drawing a grand sealing array, and slammed it down on Violet Spirit, fixing her in place. Go! Yi Xian called out to Ji Bai Yao indifferently, and walked into the depths of the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace again. He didn't even look at Violet Spirit from beginning to end. Little Nine, it's not too late for you to leave now. If you continue to cause trouble, you really won't be able to leave. Yi Xian was startled by Violet Spirit's voice transmission, but he didn't turn around. He could only sigh inwardly. Ha ha ha. Suddenly, just as Yi Xian was feeling complicated, a charming laughter rang out. A pink figure quietly blocked Yi Xian's path, and a pair of extremely charming eyes focused on Yi Xian. However, although this gaze was extremely charming, the eyes that looked at Yi Xian contained extreme hatred, as if they wanted to skin Yi Xian alive. Yi Xian raised his eyes to look at the person who came over. He saw a peerless beauty wearing a pink palace dress staring at him. It wasn't that this woman's appearance stunned Yi Xian, but because he felt like he had seen this woman somewhere before. But he couldn't remember who she was. "Little Nine, do you still remember me?" The stunning woman covered her mouth and laughed softly. "You are." Yi Xian felt more and more familiar with this woman, and a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. "Ha ha ha." The woman covered her mouth and giggled, saying, "Little Nine, you're really forgetful. When I was poisoned by your 10,000 poison powder, I was almost beaten to death by you. I didn't expect you to forget about me so quickly." 10,000 poison powder? Yi Xian murmured, and then carefully stared at this woman's appearance. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. "You're that dead enchantress Ji Yinyang?" Yi Xian asked in surprise. "Ha ha ha." Ji Yinyang covered his mouth and laughed, but his eyes were extremely sinister and full of murderous intent. "Looks like Little Nine still remembers me. Fortunately, I left behind a strand of my yang soul to escape, and even obtained a great opportunity. After going through countless difficulties and dangers, I was finally able to cultivate a human body, and even stepped into the yang birth realm. Day and night, I thought about flaying your skin and breaking your bones. Today we finally meet again." Ji Yinyang spat out venomously. Chaotic yin-yang body. This was a rare body that was both yin and yang. It didn't have any power in other realms, but once one entered the yin-yang realm, the chaotic yin-yang body would erupt with terrifying potential. Back then, Ji Yin-yang had escaped with only a wisp of his yang soul. His soul had almost been scattered between heaven and earth. Fortunately, he had encountered a great opportunity, which allowed him to return to the peak and step into the yin realm. After entering the yin realm, Ji Yin-yang's chaotic yin-yang body erupted with peerless potential and entered the Yangsheng realm in a short time. However, Yi Xian severely injured him and destroyed his yin soul. He could only choose to transform into a woman to make up for the yin-yang combination. The chaotic yin-yang body was neither male nor female. Only in the yin-yang realm could one choose to transform into a man or a woman. According to Ji Yin-yang's cultivation path, he naturally had to transform into a man. However, his yin soul was damaged, and he could only transform into a woman to ensure his cultivation. This made him hate Yi Xian to the core. Tisk tsk tsk. When Yi Xian knew Ji Yin-yang's identity, he was also surprised and said, "You are indeed a beauty after transforming into a woman. I wonder which young master will be lucky enough to marry you in the future. You must be looking forward to the taste of a man's love, right?" Yi Xian's words couldn't be said to not be vicious. Ji Yin-yang's originally fake smile had turned sinister. His transformation into a woman was his greatest pain. At this moment, when he heard Yi Xian's mocking and malicious words, he was already in a berserk state. "Little Nine, if I don't crush your bones and scatter your ashes, I won't be able to vent my hatred." Boom. Chaotic yin and yang, heaven and earth as one. Ji Yin-yang, who had entered the Yangsheng realm, was undoubtedly very terrifying. The yin and yang integration attack was brewing, and then turned into a yin-yang sky-flipping vase that rushed towards Yi Xian. Interesting. Yi Xian's face was expressionless, but his heart was deeply moved. Ji Yin-yang was indeed a peerless genius. His chaotic yin-yang body was indeed terrifying. Even Yi Xian became serious about this attack. However, he was only serious. It was not enough to make Yi Xian take him seriously. Chapter 1340. The yin-yang treasured vase was as heavy as the heavens. It shattered the void in all directions, and shot towards Yi Xian with the power of yin and yang. This was Ji Yin-yang's great technique, and he wanted to kill Yi Xian on the spot. Ji Yin-yang could not be said to be weak. In fact, he was very powerful, and could be considered outstanding among those in the same realm. This was because the chaotic yin-yang combat body was the most terrifying in the yin and yang realms. In other words, even if Ji Yin-yang faced an ultimate seed, he would be invincible with his current cultivation. There were not many in the same realm who could truly defeat him. Unfortunately, he met Yi Xian today, a Yi Xian whose battle strength had soared to the extreme. One finger. Yi Xian only pointed out a single finger, This finger seemed to be able to sever the heavens, and this finger seemed to be able to destroy the past and present. The heaven-burying divine finger shattered the yin-yang treasure bottle and shot towards Ji Yin-yang without reducing its might. Qi. The void within 80,000 miles was instantly torn apart. The vision of heavenly fire spread across the sky. Yi Xian's finger was too terrifying. Ji Yin-yang's face instantly turned gloomy. The yin-yang divine light erupted from his body as he punched forward with both fists. Bang! The heavens exploded, and the mountains and rivers were overturned. The power that erupted from the two of them shook the world violently. Ji Yin-yang, who had stepped into the Yang birth realm, was indeed terrifying. He actually blocked Yi Xian's overbearing attack. "I'll take your life," Ji Yin-yang roared. His yin and yang qi rose to the extreme. He did not believe that he was not a match for Yi Xian, even with his yin and yang fusion. He was determined to kill Yi Xian on the spot. "If I can kill you once, I can kill you a second time. Since you want to die, I'll send you on your way." Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at Ji Yin-yang with an extremely calm gaze. At this moment, Yi Xian was fearless, even in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. He didn't dare to say that he could fight against major figures above the Yang birth realm, but he believed that he was invincible in the same realm. To put it in a somewhat arrogant manner, even if a half-step Dao querying cultivator was here, with his battle prowess, he would not fear them, let alone Ji Yin-yang. "You will pay the price for your arrogance, and the only price for that is death." Ji Yin-yang was enraged. He was already chanting something. The world around him gradually darkened. Wisps of fiery smoke seeped out of his body. An extremely terrifying wave of energy was faintly released. Obviously, Ji Yin-yang was preparing an extremely terrifying technique. Perhaps it could also be called his trump card. "Stop!" Just as a great battle was about to erupt, an ancient voice rang out, and a heaven-shattering pressure crushed down, instantly dispersing the grand art Ji Yin-yang had prepared. "Greetings, Elder Yun." A stooped old man slowly walked over. He did not release any aura, as if he was just an old man. However, his appearance caused the expressions of everyone in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace to change. They all bowed in greeting. Even Ji Yin-yang and Violet Spirit were no exception. "The Heaven Master has decreed that he summons Yi Xian to the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace," Elder Yun said indifferently. His eyes were dull and lifeless as he sized up Yi Xian. He did not even glance at the others. "Elder Yun, this person dares to barge into my 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. He even has a death feud with me. Ji Yin-yang's face grew anxious. "Noisy," Elder Yun suddenly roared. He flung out his sleeve, and Ji Yin-yang was instantly sent flying. He did not even have the strength to resist. "This is the Heaven Master's decree. How dare you speak so much?" Elder Yun said coldly. "Forgive me, Elder Yun. This disciple dares not." Ji Yin-yang's mouth was bleeding. He hurriedly bowed. However, the hatred in his eyes was almost tangible. He could only endure it. "Just you wait. Just you wait. When I, Ji Yin-yang, step into the path-seeking undying realm, I will kill all these bastards who once bullied me." Ji Yin-yang roared madly in his heart. At this moment, not only did he hate Yi Xian, but he also hated Elder Yun. However, he was still young. His cultivation base could not be compared to this old man. "Yi Xian, the Heaven Master is waiting for you in the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. Follow me," Elder Yun called out to Yi Xian, and strode towards the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. Yi Xian smiled and slowly followed Elder Yun. He looked extremely calm. "Wait for me." Ji Bai Yao frowned and quickly followed Yi Xian. Only Violet Spirit, Ji Yin-yang, and the others were left behind. Each of them was feeling complicated. 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. It had existed since ancient times and was majestic. It looked like an ordinary palace. However, the great Tao laws that permeated the palace made one feel reverence. It was as though there was a supreme existence in this ancient palace. No one dared to have any thoughts of blasphemy. "Yi Xian, go in." Rumble. The door of the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace opened with a rumble. The light of 10,000 spirit faintly seeped out. One could faintly see that in the depths of the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace, There was a figure sitting cross-legged. That pair of deep eyes was looking at Yi Xian. Many thanks. Yi Xian smiled and strode into the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. Ji Baiyao's expression changed. She quickly followed behind Yi Xian. Little girl, the Heaven Master only wants to see him. You can wait outside. Elder Yin pointed a finger at Ji Baiyao and froze her in place. He lowered his head and waited calmly outside. Inside the 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace, Yi Xian slowly walked towards the figure in front of him. There was a smile on his face the entire time, even though the figure in front of him exuded a supreme aura that gave him an extremely terrifying pressure. It was unable to disturb Yi Xian's mental state in the slightest. You are very courageous. You actually appeared before me of your own accord. Moreover, you are so daring as to kill the people of my 10,000 Spirit Sky Palace. The Lord of all Spirits' light dissipated. He slowly turned around to look at Yi Xian. He did not release any supreme aura. It was as if he was talking to an old friend. I only killed a few of your people. I believe that to you. These people are just a few ants, Yi Xian said indifferently. His attitude was neither haughty nor humble. That's right. A few ants. If you killed them, then so be it. I am very happy that you have come to see me. The Lord of all Spirits nodded. You are the one who has achieved Tao. Naturally, I have to come and see you. Otherwise, it would be very uncomfortable to be stared at by you every day, Yi Xian said calmly. That's why I said that you are very courageous. The 10 supreme experts are all looking for you. But you dare to appear before me. Are you not afraid that I will kill you here? The Lord of all Spirits said coldly. Ha ha ha. Yi Xian laughed. His laugh was very casual and very presumptuous. It was as if he was not afraid of the Lord of all Spirits' anger at all. Yi Lingtian, since I dared to come and see you, I naturally think that you will not kill me, Yi Xian said firmly. You dare to call me by my name? Boom. The light of all spirits rippled out, and the void distorted. The pressure of the ancient heavens fell on Yi Xian. It was as if Yi Xian would be killed on the spot at any time. Chapter 1341. Yi Lingtian. Not only do I believe that you won't kill me, but I'm also certain that you'll protect me in the future. Save your energy for now. Do you think that threatening me is of any use? Yi Xian said coldly. Boom. The Lord of all Spirits narrowed his eyes. His aura instantly dispersed, and he calmed down once more. It was as if he was turning a blind eye to Yi Xian calling him by his name. If an outsider were to see this scene, their jaws would probably fall off in shock. After all, how could one directly call out the name of an eternal powerhouse? This was disrespectful to them. If it were anyone else, they would have died long ago. How could they still have a proper conversation with an eternal powerhouse? Speak. Where is the forbidden person? What's your relationship with him? The Lord of all Spirits' eyes were cold. He had been observing Yi Xian the entire time, and he had even used his senses to sense the entire 10,000 Spirit Palace, wanting to find traces of the ancient shadow. Fear to the extreme. Although Yi Xian's appearance delighted the Lord of all Spirits, he was more afraid. Naturally, he was not afraid of Yi Xian, but of the forbidden person that even the 10 eternal powerhouses could not defeat. Back then, Yi Xian had been taken away by this forbidden person, but now, Yi Xian was standing in front of him in perfect condition. The Lord of all Spirits did not believe that Yi Xian had nothing to do with this forbidden person. Looking at the Lord of all Spirits' cold face, Yi Xian's expression did not change, but he was secretly relieved. He knew that his guess had come true. This was Yi Xian's strategy. It was also why he dared to come to the 10,000 Spirit Palace alone to see Yi Xian. As long as the ancient shadow was still in this world, the 10 eternal powerhouses would have to fear him. He could borrow the ancient shadow's power to survive in the cracks. Borrowing the power of others was also a method of survival. Yi Xian had used it many times before. When he wasn't strong enough to compete with the strongest of the ancient times, he had to borrow the power of others to protect himself. Then he had to increase his cultivation speed and catch up to the strongest of the ancient times. Clearly Yi Xian's first step had succeeded. The Lord of all Spirits was afraid of the ancient shadow's existence, which was why he had the opportunity to talk to Yi Xian. He told me to tell you that the chaotic universe is very, very big. The so-called eternal powerhouses are just chess pieces, and I am the key to this game. Yi Xian did not say too much. He did not mention that the ancient shadow would come to seek justice for him if the 10 eternal powerhouses attacked. It was because such words were far too childish. Only ambiguous words could cause these utmost powerful beings to feel fear, allowing him to survive in the face of the utmost powerful beings' threats. Sure enough, the Lord of all spirits held his breath. He took a deep look at Yi Xian before gradually calming down. However, only the Lord of all spirits knew what he was thinking. Then you didn't come to me just because this forbidden character asked you to pass on his message, did you? The Lord of all spirits said in a deep voice. Of course not. I just want to reach an agreement with you, Yi Xian said calmly. What agreement? Do you have the right to negotiate with me? The Lord of all spirits sneered. Yi Xian was not angered by the Lord of all spirits' disdain. Instead, he said calmly, I may not have the right to negotiate with you now, but I should have the right in the future, right? You? The expression of the Lord of all spirits abruptly changed as his eyes instantly turned ice cold. This was because when Yi Xian mentioned the word future, it had already touched his greatest weakness. I once heard the Lord of Time and Space say that on the day you had yet to achieve your Tao, someone defeated you. This is also the shame of your life, Yi Xian said. What are you trying to say? The Lord of all spirits was like a frozen river. The temperature of the entire celestial palace of all spirits plummeted. Clearly, his emotions had been ignited by Yi Xian. This was because the Lord of all spirits had never been defeated in his life. Only when he was about to achieve his Tao did he lose to that person. This was his greatest shame, and it had always been a sore point in his heart. You want to wipe away your shame and fight him, but he's not a person of this space-time. He's a person born of an illusory space-time from the future. You won't be able to see him for the rest of your life. And the agreement between us is very simple. In the future, I will fight you and give you a chance to wipe away your shame. However, before I become a supreme expert, I need you to protect me and help me resist the murderous intentions of other supreme experts, Yi Xian said in a low voice. Ha ha ha. The Lord of all spirits laughed aloud. However, his laughter was very, very cold. He then gloomily looked at Yi Xian and said, What a good plan. What a good plan. According to what you said, not only can I not attack you, but I also have to protect you and even make an enemy out of other supreme experts? Although the Lord of all spirits' emotions had been ignited by Yi Xian, he was no fool. With just a little thought, he saw through Yi Xian's scheme. That's right. If you think so, that's fine too. Yi Xian very generously admitted it. This was his plan. Why should I help you? The Lord of all spirits sneered. Why should I? Yi Xian smiled and leisurely paced around the celestial palace of all spirits. After a dozen breaths of time, Yi Xian looked back at the Lord of all spirits. It's very simple, because if I die, you won't be able to wash away the shame of your defeat back then. Even if I survive, if I fall into the hands of other supreme experts, you will lose the chance to open the gate of reincarnation. Are these 2 reasons enough? Yi Xian said indifferently. Silence. Silence. A deathly silence. The entire celestial palace of all spirits fell silent. Even the surrounding spiritual light quietly dissipated. Interesting. Very interesting. Suddenly, the Lord of all spirits broke the silence and gradually calmed down. Yi Xian, you're very smart. Even if I know that this is your scheme, I don't think I have any reason to refuse, the Lord of all spirits said. I've always believed in one sentence. Everyone has a weakness. Even if you're an ancient supreme expert, you can't escape from the category of being human, Yi Xian said calmly. All right, I agree to your conditions. If any supreme expert attacks you, I won't sit back and do nothing. But you must remember our agreement. When you transform into a supreme expert, you and I will fight to the death. And when the 12 months come to an end, you must also help me open the gate of reincarnation, the Lord of all spirits said in a deep voice. All right, let's make an oath. Yi Xian stretched out his palm and looked at the Lord of all spirits. The Lord of all spirits also stretched out his palm. The two of them clapped and reached an agreement. This is my jade tablet. As long as you say my name, even if we're millions of miles apart, I'll appear before you. The Lord of all spirits took out a jade tablet and casually tossed it to Yi Xian. He then continued, but I must remind you that I'll only appear if the supreme experts plot against you. As for those ants below the supreme level, I won't care if you die at their hands. This only means that you don't have any potential and won't be a match for me in the future. Moreover, the supreme orthodoxy I've created will still have supreme seeds fighting against you. If you're killed by them, that's your fate. Of course. Yi Xian received the jade token, and the corner of his mouth curled into a strange smile. You may leave now, the Lord of all spirits said. Farewell. Yi Xian didn't waste any time and turned to leave the palace. Looking at Yi Xian's departing figure, the Lord of all spirits' eyes deepened, and he let out a long sigh. No one knew what he was thinking. Chapter 1342. Outside the myriad spirit heavenly palace, Ji Biao was anxiously waiting. She was deeply afraid that Yi Xian would be suppressed by the Lord of all spirits. At this moment, she wanted nothing more than to return to the Extreme Emotion Heavenly Palace and inform the Extreme Emotion Lord of Yi Xian's situation. Only the Extreme Emotion Lord, who was also a supreme of all eternity, could rescue Yi Xian from the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace. Ji Biao secretly hated Yi Xian's recklessness and arrogance. He clearly knew that the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace was filled with danger, and there was even the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Lord presiding over it. Yet, he actually courted death by coming here. Wasn't it better to be alive? Ta. As Ji Biao waited anxiously, Yi Xian slowly walked out of the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace with a smile on his face. This caused Ji Biao to let out a long sigh of relief. She quickly walked over to Yi Xian. Are you alright? Ji Biao looked at Yi Xian with slight worry. She was deeply afraid that the Lord of all spirits had done something to Yi Xian. It's fine. Yi Xian is a pretty good person, as expected of the current era's Tao Enlightened One. At this moment, Yi Xian was in a very good mood. He even praised the Lord of all spirits. To the side, Elder Yun's expression changed. A trace of killing intent quietly flashed through his eyes. This was all because Yi Xian had the audacity to directly call out the Lord of all spirits' name. What shocked Elder Yin even more was that Yi Xian had actually walked out of the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace unscathed. He remembered that the Lord of all spirits wanted to suppress Yi Xian in the Heavenly Palace. How could he possibly let him out? Let's go. Yi Xian called out to Ji Biao and strode into the distance. Clearly, he wanted to leave the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace. Boom! Yin Shan instantly blocked Yi Xian's path. But before he could do anything, the Lord of all spirits' voice quietly rang out. Let him go. Yes, Heavenly Master. Elder Yin was shocked and instantly opened up a path. However, his gaze towards Yi Xian was filled with extreme shock. He didn't know what Yi Xian had said to the Lord of all spirits, but it actually caused the Lord of all spirits to faintly want to protect him. Everyone below the utmost powerful being was nothing more than an ant. Elder Yin understood this logic well. Even if it were a sempiternal state being, they were nothing more than ants in the face of utmost powerful beings. As for those who could catch the attention of the strongest of all time, they were all seeds with the potential to become the strongest. When he thought of this possibility, Elder Yin was horrified, and his heart was fiercely touched. A wisp of fear even flashed past his eyes as he looked at Yi Xian's departing figure. Are you really okay? Yi Xian was strolling through the void. Ji Biao looked at Yi Xian worriedly. Looking at Yi Xian's departing figure, Ji Yinyang roared ferociously. Killing intent continuously overflowed from his body. Unfortunately, Yi Xian treated him like air and left the heavenly palace of all spirits with Ji Biao. He didn't respond to Ji Yinyang at all. In the boundless sky, clouds filled the sky. Two figures were anxiously waiting outside the heavenly palace of all spirits. When Yi Xian walked out of the heavenly palace of all spirits, the two figures were overjoyed and immediately went to greet Yi Xian. Yi Daoyu. 2. Yi Xian. These two people were Luo Ho and Yuan Ling, who were imprisoned in the heavenly palace of all spirits. When Yi Xian and the Lord of all spirits finished their conversation, the Lord of all spirits had no need to imprison them and directly sent them out. This could be considered a favor to Yi Xian. The Lord of all spirits was a personal hero. This was something that even Yi Xian had to admit. The deal between the two of them didn't need to be said. There was a benefit to dealing with smart people. There were some things that didn't need to be said too clearly. Smart people knew what to do. The Lord of all spirits was a smart person, and Yi Xian was a smart person as well. Therefore, everything went smoothly. I've made you suffer. Yi Xian smiled and nodded. He then solemnly bowed to Yuan Ling and said, "Greetings, master." Seeing Yi Xian bow to him, Yuan Ling's face flushed red. For the first time, he appeared to be at a loss. He shook his head bitterly and said, "Although I've benefited you, you've already repaid me. Besides, with your current cultivation, I'm not worthy of being your master. Without you, there would be no me. This bow is something that I ought to do." Yi Xian still bowed, not showing any neglect because of Yuan Ling's current cultivation. Good. Yuan Ling nodded repeatedly, a touch of warmth appearing in his heart. He didn't have many achievements in his life, but his only achievement was raising Yi Xian. This was enough to make him feel proud. Chapter 1343. At this moment, Ji Baiyao looked at Yuan Ling and Yi Xian in surprise. Yuan Ling's cultivation was clearly only that of a great sage. Perhaps it could be considered okay in the chaotic world, and could even be called a king in a random place. However, for these supreme orthodoxies, Yuan Ling's cultivation was too weak. But such a weak person was Yi Xian's master, which made Ji Biao feel incredulous. But Ji Biao was smart enough not to ask. After all, Yi Xian was full of mysteries. Otherwise, how could he attract the attention of so many supreme experts of all ages? Yi Daoyu, now that all the orthodoxies are looking for you, why don't we find a secluded place to cultivate peacefully? When you step into the immortal realm, you can compete for the next supreme expert of all ages in the next Yuan Hui. What do you think? Luo Ho said in a deep voice. Luo Ho was a calculative person. He could feel that Yi Xian was in danger, and the only right choice was to endure and cultivate for the time being. Some things can't be avoided, and we have to face them sooner or later. Besides, it's impossible for me to step into the immortal realm blindly, by cultivating in seclusion. Only in this era of great competition, with these so-called supreme seeds and these ancient sect masters, can my cultivation improve rapidly until I catch up with these supreme experts of all ages. Yi Xian shook his head and refused firmly, but Yi Xian didn't say something. His original intention was not to compete for the next supreme expert of all ages in the next Yuan Hui, because that time was too long. There was still 1 billion years to go, and Yi Xian couldn't wait that long. Yi Xian's ambition was so great that it was extremely terrifying. He wanted to become the supreme expert of all ages in the 10th Yuan Hui, or even surpass the supreme expert of all ages, and become the existence of the eternal shadow. This was an extremely difficult path, and it was even more of a fantasy. However, Yi Xian believed that he would definitely be able to achieve it, because the eternal shadow was an example. So what if he was the supreme expert of all ages? 10 supreme experts and 9 great star masters joined forces, but they were still at a disadvantage against the eternal shadow. If it weren't for the chaotic sanction, the 10 supreme experts and 9 great star masters would have suffered a great calamity. After witnessing the invincible demeanor of the eternal shadow, Yi Xian's ambition grew rapidly, because he was not a person who was willing to fall behind. And according to Aeon Shadow, he wasn't the only one of his kind. He knew of 2 others, and the chaos verse was vast. There were still many terrifying taboos hidden in the shadows that had yet to reveal themselves. Just those 2 alone weren't much weaker than Aeon Shadow. Therefore, Yi Xian's goal was to become the supreme expert of the eternal shadow. His ambition was to be at the same level as the eternal shadow, so that he could truly be fearless of all enemies of all worlds, and live in the real world truly in the world. There were still 1 billion years before the 10th period ended, and there were still 2 periods before the 12th period began. This seemed like a very long period of time. But if he wanted to reach the level of the eternal shadow, this amount of time might not be enough. Therefore, Yi Xian's first step was to achieve Dao in the 10th period and become a true supreme expert of all ages. This was his ambition, and also his true plan. However, it was still too early to talk about this. He was only at the young life realm, so he could only quickly seize all sorts of opportunities and furiously raise his cultivation. Only then would he be able to achieve his ambitions. Disciple, the undying Heaven Lord knows everything about you. He won't let you go, Yuan Ling said worriedly. He felt an indescribable reverence and fear for the undying Heaven Lord. The undying Heaven Lord? Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as he murmured, a cold light flashing through his eyes. I have my own ways to deal with him, Yi Xian murmured as a sinister light flickered in his eyes. Master, fellow Luo Ho, you two go to the Extreme Emotion Heavenly Palace with Ji Bai Yao first. I'm sure the Extreme Emotion Lord will protect the two of you for my sake. This will allow you to cultivate in the Extreme Emotion Heavenly Palace with peace of mind. Yi Xian pondered for a while before finally making a decision. Among the supreme experts of all ages, Yi Xian only trusted 2 people. One was the Space-Time Lord, and the other was the Extreme Emotion Lord. This was because he had a great affinity with both of them. Only by entrusting the 2 of them to the Extreme Emotion Lord would Yi Xian have nothing to worry about. Then where are you going? Luo Ho's expression changed slightly. No, you have to return to the Extreme Emotion Heavenly Palace with me, Ji Bai Yao said with dissatisfaction. Disciple you? Yuan Ling wanted to say something but stopped. I naturally have a place I need to go, because I haven't solved my troubles yet. When I'm done, I'll naturally go see the Extreme Emotion Lord, Yi Xian said. But, before Ji Bai Yao could continue, Yi Xian interrupted her. No buts. Go back and tell the Extreme Emotion Lord that when I'm done with everything, I'll naturally go see her. Yi Xian took a step forward, and the space-time power erupted. He disappeared before their eyes, not allowing them to dissuade him. Damn it! Ji Bai Yao stomped her feet, but she could only sigh helplessly. Now, she could only follow Yi Xian's instructions and take Luo Ho and Yuan Ling back to the Extreme Emotion Heavenly Palace to wait for Yi Xian's return. With the support of the space-time power, Yi Xian's speed was terrifying to the extreme. No one could catch a trace of him. Yi Xian went on the road alone again. In order to solve the problem of the Lord of all spirits, he still had 2 things to do. As long as these 2 things were done, he wouldn't have to worry about the threat of the strongest in history. He wouldn't have to be afraid of the undying Heaven Lord spying on him. Yi Xian's destination was the Devouring Heaven Demon Palace. Because his target was the Devouring Heaven Demon Lord, who dominated the world and ignored all the strongest in history. As the strongest, the undying Heaven Lord didn't place anyone in his eyes. Similarly, the Heaven-devouring Demon Lord also had this kind of temperament. This naturally caused Yi Xian to have thoughts in his heart. As long as he could deal with the Heaven-devouring Demon Lord, he would be able to survive between the cracks of the 10 strongest. Devouring Heaven Demon Palace. The world was dark and filled with demonic aura. An ancient demonic mountain stood between the heavens and the earth, and the ancient and quiet palace stood on the peak of the mountain. This was the land of devouring, the graveyard of all things, and also the slaughterhouse of 10,000 spirits. The Devouring Heaven Demon Palace wasn't good for killing, but everything they did was related to killing. This was because the Devouring Heaven Demon Lord had massacred the primal chaos in his era, creating a world-shaking and bloody era. The Devouring Heaven demonic art shocked the ancients and dazzled the contemporaries. This was an extremely terrifying technique that could strengthen one's body by devouring all living things. It was said that there was nothing it couldn't devour. Wherever the Devouring Heaven Demon Palace passed by, all living things would cease to exist. In the era of the Devouring Heaven Demon Lord, all living things in the primal chaos would tremble in fear, deeply afraid of becoming food for the Devouring Heaven Demon Palace. Chapter 1344. Unmoving like the heavens, the devil devours the heavens and the earth. Everything is silent, only I can devour the heavens. The eternal demon mountain had existed since time immemorial. In the area where the heaven-devouring demonic hall was located, no living beings could be seen. At most, one could see a few figures walking out of the heaven-devouring demonic hall from time to time, before disappearing from the area. Everyone knew how terrifying the heaven-devouring demonic hall was. Anyone who interacted with the heaven-devouring demonic hall would definitely not have a good ending. When Yi Xian arrived at the place alone, countless fierce eyes instantly focused on him. Even the heavens and earth seemed to have become slightly oppressive. The demon lord invites you in. There was no nonsense, nor did he make things difficult for Yi Xian. It was as if the demon lord had already anticipated his arrival. A ghostly figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Lead the way. Yi Xian did not find it strange that the heaven-devouring demon lord knew of his arrival. After all, the 10 supreme experts were all looking for him. He had also just gone to the Myriad Spirit Heavenly Palace. His whereabouts were probably already known to the other supreme experts. The ghostly figure glanced at Yi Xian's calmness. Clearly, he was very curious about Yi Xian. However, he did not say anything. Instead, he led the way for Yi Xian. Soon, under the guidance of this person, Yi Xian arrived at the Eternal Demon Hall without any obstructions. It could be said that the journey was more daunting than dangerous. Although the heaven-devouring demonic hall did not look big, with only this ancient demonic mountain, Yi Xian could feel countless pairs of eyes on him along the way. Occasionally, he could even feel a trace of brutal killing intent flashing past his body. Terrifying. Extremely terrifying. Yi Xian had been to various supreme orthodoxies before. Each of them had their own distinct characteristics. However, if he were to give his own feelings, Yi Xian was most afraid of the heaven-devouring demonic hall. The temporal temple was detached from worldly affairs, as if it was unwilling to be tainted by the mundane world. Although the undying heavenly palace was a hurried glance, it could still be considered normal. There were some terrifying characters hidden within. As for the current 10,000 spirit heavenly palace, it could be said to be flourishing with each passing day. Although it held great enmity towards Yi Xian, it did not pose much pressure to him. Only the heaven-devouring demonic palace seemed uninhabited, but it was filled with danger. It was as if a terrifying monster would appear at any time to devour him alive. At this moment, Yi Xian had the most intuitive feeling. Although the heaven-devouring devil hall seemed to be sparsely populated, every single member of the heaven-devouring devil hall was probably extremely terrifying. Furthermore, they were ranked in the top 5 among the 10 great orthodoxies. Although the heaven-devouring demon lord achieved his Tao in the 7th Eon, it didn't mean that he was weaker than the previous few strongest. In fact, he might have surpassed many of them. Rumble. The stone door of the heaven-devouring demonic palace rumbled open, and an ancient aura rushed out. A deep voice also sounded from within the palace. Yi Xian, come in. I've been waiting for you for a long time. This was the voice of the heaven-devouring demon lord. He did not display any supreme might, nor did he pretend to be mysterious. It was as if he was an ordinary person talking to Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled and strode into the heaven-devouring demonic palace. As the stone door rumbled and closed, Yi Xian also disappeared completely from the heaven-devouring demonic palace. Demons devoured heaven and earth, and the great Tao rumbled. The heaven-devouring demon lord was dressed in black, and his long black hair was scattered behind his head. He looked rather elegant and handsome, and didn't look much older than Yi Xian. However, his eyes were as heavy as the sky. When they turned slightly, it gave people a feeling of worship. Come have a seat. With demonic clouds on the table and divine spiritual fruits on the table. This was what was used to welcome Yi Xian. The heaven-devouring demon lord didn't put on any airs. Instead, he poured a cup of wine for Yi Xian, and casually passed it to Yi Xian, inviting Yi Xian to sit with him. Logically speaking, the heaven-devouring demon lord was extremely domineering. Not to mention Yi Xian, he wouldn't even care about other supreme experts. He wouldn't lower himself to be so courteous to Yi Xian. However, he did so, which made Yi Xian's heart tremble slightly. Fortunately, Yi Xian didn't panic at all. Instead, he took the wine cup from the heaven-devouring demon lord, and the two sat down casually, as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for many years. "I'm very happy that you can come. This proves that I'm very important to you. Let's drink." Putting aside the fact that the heaven-devouring demon lord was a supreme expert, he was very elegant and had an indescribable valiance. Ding! The wine cups of the two men clinked against each other, producing a crisp sound as they drank the wine in their cups together. Good wine. The moment the wine entered his stomach, Yi Xian's body became hot and dry. Even his cultivation showed signs of surging. Yi Xian frantically operated the heaven-bearing skill to refine this power. This wine is called blood refinement. Back then, I killed 99 Immortal Realm experts and brewed it with a drop of blood essence from their hearts. Then, I used the primordial spirits of 99 women of mysterious Een to brew it. It has the effect of strengthening one's cultivation. The heaven-devouring demon lord said calmly. Although the heaven-devouring demon lord said it casually, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes slightly. A cold light quietly flashed across his eyes. The blood essence from the hearts of 99 Immortal Realm experts, and the primordial spirits of 99 women of mysterious Een. The heaven-devouring demon lord said it casually, but the wine in the cup was not wine. It was refined with the essence of human beings. Although Yi Xian had killed countless people viciously, he was also a clean freak. This thing refined with human blood, and the primordial spirits of women really disgusted him. However, Yi Xian did not show it because the heaven-devouring demon lord was smiling at him. He seemed to be very kind to him, but in fact he was also observing him. "I had a good impression of you at first, but now you're a little annoying," Yi Xian said coldly. "Oh." The heaven-devouring demon lord smiled and said, "What do you mean? Although this wine is a great tonic, in my opinion, it's no different from eating people. Do I still need to explain?" Yi Xian said calmly. "The primordial chaos is a slaughterhouse, and all creatures are pigs and dogs. I can take whatever I want. Why can't I?" The heaven-devouring demon lord said casually, comparing the primordial chaos to a slaughterhouse. And all creatures in the primordial chaos are pigs and dogs. There is nothing in this primordial chaos that you can't devour. I have indeed experienced your fierce reputation. Yi Xian did not feel disgusted by the heaven-devouring demon lord's actions. Instead, he faintly agreed with him because he was this kind of person. However, the only difference between him and the heaven-devouring demon lord was that the heaven-devouring demon lord treated all creatures as pigs and dogs. They were just food in his mouth, and he could take whatever he wanted. However, Yi Xian was not like this. Although he would do anything to achieve his goals, and could kill and leave corpses everywhere, he had never treated humans as food. Although his tribulation transcender technique also allowed him to devour the blood, souls, and essence of others, it was for his own cultivation. Chapter 1345. On the other hand, the heaven-devouring demon master had completely walked down the path of demons. Be it humans or other races, he had already identified them as his food. This was fundamentally different from Yi Xian. "I really want to know if you will die if you devour all the creatures of chaos one day, and there is nothing left for you to devour." Suddenly, after a few breaths of silence, Yi Xian asked the heaven-devouring demon master an extremely abrupt question. This caused the smile on the heaven-devouring demon master's face to gradually turn gloomy, as though Yi Xian's question had hit his soft spot. "Yi Xian, I have always thought that you and I are the same type of person. Even though you didn't cultivate my heaven-devouring demonic art, your devouring technique is similar to mine. But now, it seems like you aren't the person I want. I suddenly have the thought of killing you." Buzz. The heaven-devouring demonic light spread and shrouded the entire heaven-devouring demonic palace. Even the heaven-devouring demon master's eyes turned blood-red, in an instant, as though he would devour Yi Xian at the very next moment. Unfortunately, in the face of the heaven-devouring demon master's terrifying murderous intent, Yi Xian didn't panic at all. Instead, he picked up a fruit from the table and ate it casually. This scene made the heaven-devouring demon master tense up. At the next moment, the murderous intent disappeared without a trace, and the corners of his mouth curled into a self-mocking smile. Interesting. You are really bold. You are constantly provoking me. But this won't do you any good because I am not the undying God Lord. Perhaps he only wants to obtain the secret of opening the gate of reincarnation from you, and not kill you. But if you really infuriate me, I will devour you until not even your bones are left, the heaven-devouring demon master said. I don't want to waste time talking nonsense. I'm sure you have guessed that I came to see you today. I just want to make a deal with you. Yi Xian didn't want to continue testing each other with the heaven-devouring demon master. Both of them had great goals for each other, and getting straight to the point was the most direct way. Oh, what deal? The heaven-devouring demon master sat down again. He raised his wine cup and drained the contents. However, a demonic light flashed across his eyes. There was a hint of mockery in his eyes. If I'm not wrong, although you've attained the Tao for a long time, you've already fallen deeply into the devil path. Every now and then, you'll have to devour an enormous amount of energy to maintain your cultivation. If you can't devour enough energy, I'm afraid you'll die, right? Boom. Yi Xian directly threw out a heavy bomb. As soon as he finished speaking, the wine cup in the heaven-devouring demon master's hand was crushed. The originally teasing expression on his face turned gloomy. Go on. However, the heaven-devouring demon master didn't show any killing intent. He merely spat out 3 words, and his eyes were already focused on Yi Xian. Devouring the heavens, devouring the earth, and all living things as food. Your heaven-devouring demonic art can be said to be unparalleled since ancient times, and all living things in the chaos tremble in fear when they hear its name. However, I believe that in this world, there are always gains and losses. Blindly devouring all living things to increase your cultivation seems extremely terrifying, but the chaotic universe is fair. I'm afraid you'll have to pay a painful price for it, right? Yi Xian spoke frankly with assurance. Go on. Yi Xian didn't say a word. The heaven-devouring demon master's gaze turned even colder. This was because what Yi Xian said was related to a great secret of the heaven-devouring demon master. And this secret was only known to him. You attained Tao in the 7th era. That was the darkest era in the chaos. Wherever the heaven-devouring demon master passed, all living things perished and became food for your mouth. From the perspective of the 10 great Yuans, you, the heaven-devouring demon lord, have reached the Tao the fastest. You have only used less than 50 million years to reach the Tao, while the other supreme experts have used several times more time to reach the Tao than you. Your cultivation is also ranked in the top 5 of the 10 supreme experts. What are you trying to say? The heaven-devouring demon master's eyes narrowed. His 5 fingers constantly tapped on the table, producing a ticking sound. This proved that his heart wasn't calm. You've fallen into the demonic path. It's not your temperament that has fallen into the demonic path, but because of the heaven-devouring demonic art. Although this supreme technique was created by you, it has a great flaw, and that is the word devouring. Yi Xian looked at the heaven-devouring demon master. His voice was resolute and decisive as he continued. Only by constantly devouring will you be able to calm the heaven-devouring demonic art. Only then will you be able to maintain your cultivation as an eternal and surpass the other sovereigns. But when you don't devour enough energy, the heaven-devouring demonic art will begin to devour you. It will spontaneously devour your cultivation and soul until you're nothing more than a wisp of ash. In the end, you won't even need to wait until the end of the 12 eras. You won't even be able to see the gate of reincarnation. Your soul will scatter and die. How can you be so sure? The heaven-devouring demon master's voice was extremely sinister. It's simple, because the Forbidden One told me that the chaos verse is fair. In this world, there are gains and losses. The heaven-devouring demonic art you created is truly terrifying. Aside from the 3 sovereigns of chaos, destiny, and space-time, your technique is capable of suppressing the other sovereigns. But the reason why you're so strong is because of the heaven-devouring demonic art. However, this heaven-defying technique has already violated the Forbidden One. The Chaos Verse simply cannot tolerate you, and yet you're still safe and sound. This means that the heaven-devouring demonic art has a fatal flaw. Only by constantly devouring and madly devouring can you maintain your existence in this world. Am I right, respected Lord Heaven-devouring Demon Master? Yi Xian revealed his white teeth as he smiled at the heaven-devouring Demon Master. Clap, clap, clap. The heaven-devouring Demon Master clapped his hands. He was clapping very sincerely. However, the terrifying heaven-devouring demonic light had already overflowed. He looked at Yi Xian, as though he was looking at a dead man. You're very smart. So smart that I'm amazed. But don't you know that smart people die very quickly? The heaven-devouring demon master's killing intent was revealed. I don't know whether or not I'll die very quickly, but I am the respected Lord Heaven-devouring Demon Master. You shouldn't be able to survive past the 10th period, because the heaven-devouring demonic art in your body has already begun to backfire. Even if I die by your hands today, it won't be long before you join me. However, this is truly laughable. Who would have thought that the Grand 7th period's strongest expert, the one who instilled fear in all living beings throughout the ages, would actually suffer a backlash from the strongest technique he created? In the end, his soul would scatter. If news of this were to spread, I'm afraid you'll become the biggest laughingstock in the Chaos Verse. Yi Xian showed no fear in the face of the heaven-devouring demon master's killing intent. Instead, his words were filled with mockery, as though he wasn't afraid that the heaven-devouring demon master would kill him. Silence! Silence! A deathly silence. The heaven-devouring demon master stared at Yi Xian. His heaven-devouring demonic light rippled with terrifying intensity. With a single glance, he wouldn't even need to do anything to kill Yi Xian. Yi Xian would die in front of him and become food for him. Chapter 1346. Do you really think that I won't dare to touch you just because you have the protection of a taboo? Boom! The heaven-devouring demon master took a step forward and grabbed Yi Xian's neck with his 5 fingers, lifting him into the air. His 5 fingers were like pillars that supported the sky, suppressing Yi Xian until his face turned red, and he couldn't use his cultivation at all. Murderous intent. The strongest murderous intent since the beginning of time. However, although Yi Xian couldn't speak or move, he still had a smile of contempt on his face. His gaze was even more provocative as he looked at the heaven-devouring demon lord. It was as if Yi Xian was telling the heaven-devouring demon master that he had grasped the latter's weakness and was certain that the latter wouldn't dare to kill him. You can try if you don't believe me. Looking at Yi Xian's contemptuous eyes, the heaven-devouring demon master would have swallowed Yi Xian alive if it was any other time. Only then would he be able to vent his anger. But he couldn't. He really couldn't kill Yi Xian because the chance to solve his crisis lay with Yi Xian. Perhaps the other strongest since the beginning of time were plotting Yi Xian's secrets and wanted to use Yi Xian to push open the door of reincarnation. However, the heaven-devouring demon master was different. He wanted to surpass the strongest and solve the hidden danger in his body. As long as he could solve the hidden danger of the heaven-devouring demonic skill, he believed that with the perfect heaven-devouring demonic skill, he could also break through the chaotic reincarnation and truly transcend. Therefore, Yi Xian couldn't die. Buzz! The heaven-devouring demon light disappeared without a trace, and the palm on Yi Xian's neck slowly loosened. However, the heaven-devouring demon master's face was as gloomy as water, and he was still staring at Yi Xian with an unfriendly gaze. I don't like the look in your eyes because they are filled with anger. This isn't the attitude of someone who is begging for help. Yi Xian twisted his neck, as if the sky-devouring demon master had really hurt him. Then, he sat down in front of the table again, and picked up another spiritual fruit to eat. The sky-devouring demon master's sinister expression gradually calmed down. He sat opposite Yi Xian and said calmly, "Kid, I'm not in the mood to talk nonsense with you. Tell me your purpose. Wouldn't it have been better if you had been so amiable from the start?" If I was really afraid of your identity, how would I have dared to come and meet you? Am I right? Yi Xian said with a faint smile. Cut the crap and tell me your purpose. In the face of Yi Xian, who was unmoved by force or persuasion, the heaven-devouring demon master had completely lost his temper. You created the heaven-devouring demonic art back then. Presumably, this technique was also comprehended from the heaven-breaking cauldron. My tribulation transcender technique is also closely related to the heaven-breaking cauldron. The two can be said to be of the same origin. What you have always wanted from me is the tribulation transcender technique. Presumably, when the two techniques are combined into one, it will make your heaven-devouring demonic art perfect and naturally solve the hidden dangers in your body. I wonder if I'm right. Yi Xian said tirelessly. Yes. The heaven-devouring demon master did not hide anything. He was indeed coveting Yi Xian's tribulation transcender technique. He admitted it very generously and did not hide anything. In the past, he had obtained a heaven-breaking cauldron and comprehended the heaven-devouring demonic art from it. However, a great enemy had invaded at that time, and the heaven-breaking cauldron was lost in that battle. Unfortunately, he had lost the most important general outline. When the heaven-devouring demon master learned that Yi Xian could also devour the cultivation of others without using the heaven-devouring demonic art, he knew that the general outline of the heaven-devouring demonic art had been obtained by Yi Xian. Therefore, he was so eager to find Yi Xian. He wanted to take back the tribulation transcender technique from Yi Xian, which was the most important general outline of the heaven-devouring demonic art. Only then could he perfect the heaven-devouring demonic art. However, there was one thing that the heaven-devouring demon master did not say. Although the hidden dangers of the heaven-devouring demonic art were great, and only the tribulation transcender technique could eliminate this hidden danger, what really excited the heaven-devouring demon master was that the combination of the tribulation transcender technique and the heaven-devouring demonic art could give him a chance to surpass the strongest of all eternity and become a taboo character like the Eternal Shadow. The heaven-devouring demon master was very ambitious. Because of the terrifying cultivation speed of the heaven-devouring demonic art, he clearly felt that there was an extremely terrifying realm above the strongest of all eternity. In the past, the heaven-devouring demon master only guessed and did not dare to be sure. However, when the Eternal Shadow came out of the long river of time and showed his invincible means, he was finally sure that there was an extremely terrifying realm above the strongest of all eternity. This realm was also known as the Forbidden Realm. Although it was not tolerated by the chaotic universe, it had unimaginable power. Even if the 10 strongest of all eternity joined forces, they were still not the opponent of the Forbidden Realm. Yi Xian, hand over the tribulation transcender technique. Not only will this heaven-devouring demon master protect you, but even the people of my heaven-devouring demon palace will listen to your orders. The entire heaven-devouring demon palace will escort you until you become the strongest of all eternity. The heaven-devouring demon master was very generous. He was so generous that he made a promise that no one could refuse. As long as Yi Xian was willing to hand over the tribulation transcender technique, he would definitely fulfill his promise. If it were anyone else, they would have already handed over the tribulation transcender technique. Unfortunately, the heaven-devouring demon master met Yi Xian, who was even more ambitious than him. I can give you the tribulation transcender technique, but I don't need your promise. As long as you agree to 2 of my conditions, I will give you the tribulation transcender technique. Yi Xian was already prepared. Say it, what are your conditions? Just because Yi Xian dared to come to see him alone, the heaven-devouring demon master could not underestimate Yi Xian. Although Yi Xian's cultivation was just like an ant in his eyes, he was definitely an extremely difficult guy to deal with. The first condition is that I want you to protect me until I step into the immortal realm. If there are other supreme experts who want to kill me or imprison me, you must immediately appear to block them for me, and even force them back. Yi Xian said in a low voice. Okay. The heaven-devouring demon master did not hesitate and directly agreed to the first condition. As for the second condition, it's very simple. I will give you the Tribulation Transcender technique, and you will also give me the Heaven-Devouring Demonic technique. This shouldn't be too difficult for you, right? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and finally revealed his true purpose. You want the Heaven-Devouring Demonic technique? The Heaven-Devouring Demon Master was startled, and his face instantly turned gloomy. He looked at Yi Xian with a touch of coldness in his eyes, and his whole person became silent. The Heaven-Devouring Demon Master did not care about the Heaven-Devouring Demonic technique. Even if he really gave it to Yi Xian, it did not matter. This was just his inheritance. In the beginning, he wanted Yi Xian to be his inheritor. But now it was different. If he gave the Heaven-Devouring Demonic technique to Yi Xian would naturally leave and not become a member of his Heaven-Devouring Demon Palace. And the most important thing was that when the Heaven-Devouring Demonic technique and the Tribulation Transcender technique were combined, the Heaven-Devouring Demonic technique would reach a perfect state. Then, Yi Xian would also master this technique like him. In the eyes of the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master, this was absolutely not allowed. A Heaven-Devouring Demonic technique, without any hidden dangers, could devour the cultivation of others at will. It was enough for the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master to have it alone. If a second person had this technique, it would be a great threat. Chapter 1347. Impossible. Change your condition. The Heaven-Devouring Demon Master flatly refused. No one knew how terrifying the Heaven-Devouring Demon technique was better than the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master. If this technique was cultivated together with the Tribulation Transcender technique, Yi Xian would become the second him. No, not only the second him, but he would even surpass the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master. Moreover, Yi Xian had so many secrets. The Heaven-Devouring Demon Master understood this very well. Since the Demon Master doesn't agree, then we have nothing to talk about. Goodbye. Yi Xian slammed the table and stood up. He turned around and was about to leave, but before he could take 3 steps, the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master's cold voice suddenly sounded. Is my Heaven-Devouring Demon Palace a place where you can come and go as you please? Demon Master, do you still want me to stay? Yi Xian suddenly looked back at the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master with a strange look in his eyes. You can't leave if you don't hand over the Tribulation Transcender technique. I would rather not give up this technique and kill you. I will never let you bring the Tribulation Transcender technique to the outside world. The Heaven-Devouring Demon Master's killing intent reappeared. Kill me? Yi Xian smiled. His smile was very elegant and fearless as he said, I will stand here and wait for you to kill me. However, I have to remind you that if I die in your hands, I'm afraid you won't be able to live either. At this moment, the atmosphere in the entire Heaven-Devouring Demon Palace was oppressive to the extreme. Terrifying demonic light raged in the void. The Heaven-Devouring Demon Master's eyes turned blood red, but he didn't make a move. Fear, absolute fear. Although the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master was arrogant and extremely overbearing, he was very smart. He believed that Yi Xian would never dare to meet him if he didn't have absolute confidence. Moreover, Yi Xian had just walked out of the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Palace safe and sound, but the 10,000 Spirit Heavenly Master actually let him go. This explained a huge problem. A taboo character. That taboo character who had walked out of the River of Time was protecting Yi Xian. Otherwise, the Lord of all spirits would never have allowed Yi Xian to leave. The Heaven-Devouring Demon Master seemed to have an unfathomable killing intent, but he was actually weighing the pros and cons in his heart. Killing Yi Xian was very simple. As long as he willed it, Yi Xian would die. However, if Yi Xian were to really die, and that taboo character appeared, he would definitely be no match for him. It was even more likely that he would die at the hands of that taboo character. That was a price he could not afford to pay. If he had not seen the Aeon Shadow and experienced that terrifying battle, the Heaven-Devouring Demon Master would not have such fear. However, he had seen the terror of the Aeon Shadow, which was why he had not attacked Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian's expression was calm and unperturbed. Instead, he had a fearless expression as he confronted the heaven-devouring demon lord. However, no one knew that at this moment, Yi Xian's heart was already extremely nervous. His body and mind were already tense, and drops of cold sweat were dripping down his back. As the saying goes, one knows one's own affairs best. The Aeon Shadow was not here at all. He was a taboo character. If he appeared in the Primal Chaos universe, he would definitely be punished by the Primal Chaos universe. If the heaven-devouring demon master really wanted to kill him, Yi Xian would not be able to resist at all. Yi Xian was gambling. He was gambling with his life at this moment. He was gambling that the heaven-devouring demon master would not dare to kill him. First, it was the Tribulation Transcender technique, and second, it was his fear of the Aeon Shadow. Yi Xian had planned this gamble for a long time, and he had thought of every step. He believed that he would not lose. He would definitely be able to survive this crisis and obtain great benefits for himself. Haha. Suddenly, the overwhelming killing intent dissipated as the heaven-devouring demon lord laughed out loud. Yi Xian knew that he'd made the right bet. As expected, the heaven-devouring demon lord didn't dare to kill him. This caused him to secretly heave a sigh of relief, but his back was already drenched in cold sweat. However, Yi Xian slightly operated the heaven burial technique, and the wet clothes on his back instantly returned to their original state. Yi Xian was extremely calm from beginning to end, as if he was really fearless. However, only Yi Xian himself knew that he had smelled the scent of death just now. Fortunately, his will was extremely tough, and even under the supreme killing intent he survived. The so-called borrowing power was borrowing the power of the Aeon Shadow, coupled with the fact that Yi Xian had the heaven-devouring demon master's item. Yi Xian was able to survive this crisis. The heaven-devouring demon master finally compromised. Okay, I agree to the second condition, but you also have to agree to one of my conditions. That is, the heaven-devouring demon technique and the calamity immortal technique cannot be passed to anyone else. Of course. Yi Xian slowly nodded. Wait for me here. The heaven-devouring demon master took a deep look at Yi Xian before taking a step and disappearing. Yi Xian also waited patiently. He sat cross-legged in the void and began to cultivate. 3 days later, the heaven-devouring demon master returned with a stone scripture in his hand. He casually threw this scripture to Yi Xian, and Yi Xian gently caught it and began to flip through it. The heaven-devouring demon master said, "The heaven-devouring demon technique is a powerful technique. Not only does it contain my various devouring techniques, but it also contains extremely powerful techniques. Once you have finished reviewing it, give me the calamity immortal technique." While flipping through the scripture, Yi Xian's eyes constantly bloomed with splendor. This heaven-devouring demon technique was indeed broad and profound. It explained in detail what the path of devouring was. The techniques and magical abilities contained in it were extremely powerful. It was worthy of being called a supreme technique. Take it. Yi Xian closed the scripture and casually shot out a jade talisman. The method of the calamity immortal technique was recorded within, and this allowed the heaven-devouring demon master to quickly take it in his hand and sink his consciousness into the jade talisman. Time passed little by little. After half a day, the heaven-devouring demon master finally withdrew his consciousness. He even said 3 words of praise. So that's how it is. So that's how it is. This is the true essence of devouring. It's worthy of being the general outline of the heaven-devouring demon technique. What a great technique. The heaven-devouring demon master laughed wildly. He was extremely excited. This calamity immortal technique might only be a great magical ability for others, but for him, it was the key to solving the hidden dangers of the heaven-devouring demon technique. It was also the greatest help for him to advance to the forbidden realm. Looking at the excited expression of the heaven-devouring demon master, Yi Xian's eyes quietly flashed with a strange color. Then he concealed it very well, and his whole person was still very calm. Take this jade talisman, and you can go. If there are other powerful existences that make things difficult for you, just crush this jade talisman. Even if you are hundreds of millions of miles away, I will appear in front of you. The heaven-devouring demon master casually threw out a black jade talisman, which was directly received by Yi Xian. Obviously, this jade talisman had the same effect as the jade talisman given by the Lord of all spirits. It could summon powerful existences to his side. Thank you. Yi Xian didn't say any nonsense. He put away the scripture and the jade talisman and strode towards the outside world. However, the heaven-devouring demon master inadvertently sneered. Then, he took the Calamity Immortal technique and disappeared from the heaven-devouring demon palace. Outside, Yi Xian didn't stop. The power of space and time rippled out, directly allowing him to travel through space and instantly disappear from the ancient demon mountain. Heaven Lord, are you really not going to let him stay? A ghostly figure watched Yi Xian leave, then turned around and bowed in the direction of the heaven-devouring demon palace. Let him go. I don't think he can cause any trouble. The majestic voice of the heaven-devouring demon master sounded. Chapter 1348. Chaotic Starry Sky, Multicolored Star Sea. On a withered and nameless star, Yi Xian was sitting cross-legged. The heaven-devouring demonic art was placed on his knees, and he was flipping through it page by page. Heaven-devouring, you really deserve to die. You actually gave me a fake heaven-devouring demonic art. Do you think I can't see through it? Yi Xian sneered again, and again, as he closed the heaven-devouring demonic art in his hand. Although Yi Xian had never cultivated the heaven-devouring demonic art, he had cultivated the tribulation transcender technique for so many years, so he had a very good understanding of the path of devouring. Fake. It was indeed fake. The heaven-devouring demonic art in Yi Xian's hand was not the real thing at all, but a fake that had been tampered with by the heaven-devouring demon master. When he was inspecting it in the heaven-devouring demon palace, Yi Xian had already discovered this situation. It was just that Yi Xian pretended to be confused and did not expose this fact. Instead, he left the heaven-devouring demon palace with this fake heaven-devouring demonic art because he had already gotten what he wanted. This heaven-devouring demonic art was indeed fake, and the heaven-devouring demon master had changed several of the most important contents. Although only a few contents had been tampered with, the secret techniques and some of the operation methods were indeed real. As the saying goes, 70% true and 30% false. This move of the heaven-devouring demon master was indeed very clever. Unfortunately, the heaven-devouring demon master did not know that Yi Xian did not really want his heaven-devouring demonic art. The few important operation routes that he had tampered with were actually not important to Yi Xian. What Yi Xian really wanted was the profound meaning of the heaven-devouring demonic art, as well as the various secret techniques and devouring techniques recorded in it. As mentioned before, only the techniques and paths that were suitable for oneself were the strongest. Therefore, Yi Xian created the heaven-burying technique and had been perfecting it. The space-time technique, the undying immortal scripture, the 10,000 spirits immortal scripture, the boundless mortal world technique, and the star origin secret art. Yi Xian had read all of them and used them as the foundation to create the heaven-burying technique. Yi Xian's ambition was great. He wanted to read all the supreme techniques and integrate them into the heaven-burying technique he had created, to create the #1 technique of all time in the future. This was his real goal. This goal, although the heaven-devouring demon master had the heaven-devouring demon art, he had the heaven-devouring demonic art. Had he already had the heaven-devouring demonic art, and that was enough he, by Yi Xian had. Since the heaven-devouring demon lord was playing tricks with him, then he, Yi Xian, naturally wasn't someone to be trifled with. There was naturally a problem with the Calamity Immortal technique he gave. The Tribulation Transcender technique was real, and this was indeed real. If he had given the heaven-devouring demon master a fake one, with his cultivation and experience, he would not have been able to fool him. Yi Xian had only extracted a trace of the Tribulation Transcender technique's profound meaning. It was just a trace, and the scripture really could not be real. However, just this trace of profound meaning was enough to prevent the heaven-devouring demon lord from advancing even an inch. This was the trump card that Yi Xian had left behind. Yi Xian admitted that he was indeed not the heaven-devouring demon master's opponent, but in terms of scheming, he might not be worse than the heaven-devouring demon master. Heaven-devouring, you are indeed very strong now. You are an existence beyond my reach, but don't be complacent too early. In the future, I will let you know what the #1 technique of all time is. Your heaven-devouring demonic art will also be overshadowed by it. Yi Xian sneered and whispered. From the moment he stepped into the heaven-devouring demon palace, Yi Xian had already made all the preparations. He had no intention of really giving the Tribulation Transcender technique to the heaven-devouring demon master. Although Yi Xian didn't have much contact with the heaven-devouring demon lord, from his way of doing things, the heaven-devouring demon lord was definitely an unbridled and ambitious person. This kind of person was fierce by nature. If he obtained the Tribulation Transcender technique, coupled with his heaven-devouring demonic art, he would definitely become a big problem in the future. Therefore, Yi Xian had a trump card. The Tribulation Transcender technique was the trump card he had left behind. Although he had only extracted a trace of its profound meaning, it was enough to make the heaven-devouring demon master stay in the strongest realm. Inhale, 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 inhale. On this withered planet, Yi Xian was adjusting his breathing and breathing. He was also deducing the profound meaning of the heaven-devouring demonic art, wanting to gradually integrate it into his heaven-burying technique. This was an extremely slow process, but Yi Xian was very patient. He integrated the profound meaning contained in the heaven-devouring demonic art into his body bit by bit, comprehending the so-called path of devouring. Then, he turned this comprehension into his own and constantly practiced the heaven-burying technique in his mind. Of course, Yi Xian was not really cultivating. He was sitting on this planet waiting for someone, waiting for some very important people. Otherwise, Yi Xian would not have looked for such a withered planet and waited here for a long time. He was waiting for the arrival of some people. These people were of course the 9 great star masters. Chaos Star Masters, the power of the star source. Although Chaos Star Masters were not as strong as the strongest of all time, they were only half a realm away. They were also known to be existences that could challenge the strongest of all time. Although they weren't famous and weren't as famous as the strongest of all time, Chaos Star Masters definitely couldn't be underestimated. The key was that Yi Xian didn't know what their goal was when the 9 great star masters appeared together. Yi Xian didn't choose this star for no reason. He'd already inscribed star runes one after another. As long as the 9 great star masters really wanted to find him, they could rely on the aura of these star runes to find him. Sure enough, not more than 3 days later, a figure quietly appeared in front of Yi Xian. This person was dressed in coarse hemp clothes and looked extremely old. His grayish-white hair was slightly messy, and he looked like an old man who had fallen from the streets. "You finally appeared," the old man said softly. At this moment, Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes and looked up at the old man. Sure enough, he realized that the other party was one of the 9 great star masters. "You're alone." Yi Xian narrowed his eyes, and a strange look flashed across his eyes. "Back then we were all injured in that battle. Right now, we're all recovering from our injuries. I'm the only one looking for you," the old man said in a deep voice. "May I know Senior's name?" Yi Xian asked. "My name is Xingyan, a 9th generation Chaos Star Master. You can call me Elder Xing." Elder Xing smiled and nodded. Elder Xing, Yi Xian cupped his hands and bowed. He appeared very humble, because he could feel that this Chaos Star Master before him had no ill intentions towards him. "Child, you're the 10th generation successor of the Chaos Star Masters. Now that you're surrounded by danger, I'll be direct with some things. Listen to me slowly." Elder Xing did not beat around the bush. He had finally found Yi Xian after much difficulty, so he naturally had to tell Yi Xian everything. He also had to let Yi Xian understand the responsibility of a Chaos Star Master. Chaotic Universe 12 Yuan Hui, the lineage of Star Masters. Chaos Star Masters were extremely ancient existences. They had existed since the birth of the chaotic universe, and Chaos Star Master was only the name known by all living beings. In fact, Chaos Star Masters had another name, and this name was Guardian of all living beings. Chapter 1349. Yes, the Guardian of Myriad Spirits. Ever since the primal chaos universe was created, the Chaos Star Masters had been protecting this primal chaos universe and protecting the myriad spirits of chaos from harm. Even during the era of the heaven-devouring demon lord of the seventh Aeon, the myriad spirits of chaos had suffered unimaginable massacres. The seventh-generation Chaos Star Master had fought against the heaven-devouring demon lord in order to stop his massacre and save the myriad spirits of chaos. The seventh-generation Chaos Star Master had been defeated in that battle. Although he had the strength to challenge the heaven-devouring demon lord, he was ultimately not the heaven-devouring demon lord's match. However, the seventh-generation Chaos Star Master had asked the heaven-devouring demon lord to stop, because the Chaos Star Masters could borrow the power of the primal chaos universe. Although they weren't strong themselves, the Tongtian stellar origin technique was able to communicate with the primal chaos, and would definitely pose a terrifying threat to the primal chaos universe. Protecting the primal chaos universe and loving the myriad spirits of chaos was the destiny and responsibility of the Chaos Star Masters. It wasn't just the era of the heaven-devouring demon lord. In the fourth Aeon, where the undying god lord was from, the fourth-generation Chaos Star Masters had also taken action and stopped the undying god lord's massacre. The extreme devil and destruction Star Masters of these two eras had taken action. Protecting the myriad spirits of chaos had also become the responsibility of every generation of Chaos Star Masters. When Yi Xian heard this, a trace of doubt flashed through his eyes. Why could the Chaos Star Masters stop the primal chaos universe's massacre? He had seen the Chaos Star Masters being no match for the primal chaos universe's strongest. Could it be that the Chaos Star Masters had some unfathomable method that he didn't know of that made the primal chaos universe's strongest feel apprehensive? However, Yi Xian didn't voice his doubts. Instead, he frowned slightly and said, "Elder Xing, you mean that I'm the 10th generation Chaos Star Master, so I also have to protect the 10th Aeon?" Yes and no. Elder Xing gave an ambiguous answer. He looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression and said, "The fate of the 10th generation Chaotic Star Master is indeed on you. But there is something that I am very puzzled about. There is no astral origin power in your body, only a remnant of astral origin energy. It is as if you have never cultivated the astral origin art. This makes me feel very strange." After hearing old Xing's words, Yi Xian naturally knew what was going on. This was because he really hadn't cultivated the astral origin art. The one who had truly cultivated the astral origin art was his avatar. As for him, he had merely fused his comprehension of the astral origin art into his own heaven-burying art. However, Yi Xian naturally couldn't explain it. His avatar was his secret, and one of his trump cards. Even if he had a good impression of the Chaos Star Masters, he wouldn't reveal his secret. Perhaps the time isn't right yet, and you haven't formally trained in the astral origin art. However, I want to tell you that the protection of the entire Chaos verse and the primordial chaos is the responsibility of us Chaos Star Masters. I hope that you can shoulder this responsibility," Elder Xing said. "Protect the Chaos verse? Protect the creatures of chaos? Benevolence? Universal love?" Yi Xian muttered to himself, but a strange smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He, Yi Xian, had never been a good person, let alone something as boring as benevolence and universal love. He only believed in slaughter. The so-called creed of the Chaos Star Masters was the complete opposite of himself. "It seems that you've misunderstood. I'm not the person you think I am. The so-called protection of the creatures of chaos and the chaos verse is nothing but a joke in my eyes," Yi Xian said coldly. "No, you're the person we're looking for. You were able to pass the primordial chaos trial and obtain the Chaos Star Master's legacy. This proves that you're a kind person. Otherwise, the Chaos Star Master's legacy wouldn't have appeared in your possession, Elder Xing said resolutely. Yi Xian laughed. This was the first time someone had called him a kind person. How could he not want to laugh? In Yi Xian's memories, ever since he had stepped onto the path of cultivation, he had killed countless people and committed countless heinous crimes. All the obstacles in his path of cultivation had been crushed by him, and even his friends and loved ones had been buried in the ground. Some had died because of him, and some had been killed by him. How could such a person be called a kind person? When he was 14 years old and faced a dead end in the Blood Sea battlefield, he had long since abandoned kindness and compassion. All that remained was viciousness and mercilessness. Now, someone actually called him a kind person and wanted him to protect the Chaos Verse and the creatures of chaos. Wasn't this the biggest joke in the world? However, this joke wasn't funny at all to Yi Xian. Instead, it made him feel extremely disgusted. If the 9 Chaos Star Masters all viewed him like this, then they weren't on the same path at all. Alright, you say I'm a kind person, and that I want to protect the Chaos Verse and the creatures of chaos. But I really want to know something. Although Chaos Star Masters are very powerful, they aren't a match for the strongest throughout history. What do you want me to do to protect them? Yi Xian said indifferently. However, if one listened carefully, they would discover that his words contained a hint of contempt. The Star Master didn't understand what Yi Xian was implying. Instead, he looked solemnly at Yi Xian. With a flip of his hand, a black and white chessboard appeared. He handed it over to Yi Xian with great solemnity. The Star Chessboard. This is the legacy of us Chaos Star Masters. It can seize the mysteries of the Chaos Verse and turn the stars into chess pieces. It's a supreme treasure of the Chaos Verse. Even against the strongest throughout history, it can be used to advance and retreat. With starlight as the chessboard and the stars as the chess pieces, the chessboard flickered with starlight. Just by looking at it, one could sense a vast, heavy and ancient presence. It proved that the chessboard was indeed a chaos treasure. The next moment Yi Xian's eyes narrowed. A smear of greed flashed through his eyes. This was indeed a treasure that he was very interested in. If he could obtain the chessboard, it would be extremely helpful to him. Looking at the black and white chessboard that Elder Xing handed over, Yi Xian probed. You want to give this to me? This is a legacy of us Chaos Star Masters. You're the 10th generation Chaos Star Master, so it naturally has to be given to you, the Star Master said solemnly. Then I'll accept it. Yi Xian wouldn't put on an act. Facing such a treasure, he naturally wanted to take it for himself. He was about to directly accept the black and white chessboard, and a trace of gratification appeared on Elder Xing's face. Suddenly, when Yi Xian was about to touch the black and white chessboard, his entire body froze. His brows slightly furrowed, but he didn't take the treasure into his hand. As the saying went, there was no free lunch in the world. It could be said to be the inheritance of the Chaos Star Masters. It was indeed a chaos treasure. But if he really accepted it, things would become extremely complicated. Take it. With this inheritance item, even if the strongest of the ancient times wants to kill you, you can use this item to escape. They won't be able to find you. Elder Xing said sincerely. Chapter 1350. I can't accept it. At this moment, these 3 words flashed through Yi Xian's mind. If he accepted this inheritance, then he would have to shoulder the responsibility of a Chaos Star Master. Finally, Yi Xian suppressed the greed in his heart and didn't accept the item. Instead, he looked at Elder Xing quietly. No one knew what he was thinking. You want to harm me? Yi Xian's eyes were cold. I don't want to harm you. I just hope that you can walk the right path and understand the responsibility of being a Chaos Star Master. Elder Xing frowned. The chaos has nothing to do with me. The so-called Chaos Star Master inheritance was obtained by chance. You want me to protect the Chaos Verse with you? That's a joke in my eyes. If I'm not wrong, if I accept this item, my cultivation will be washed away by it, and I'll only be able to cultivate the so-called astral origin art. Right? Yi Xian said coldly. That's right. Elder Xing admitted it very generously before earnestly advising. However, we truly have no intention of harming you. Although this inheritance item will erase the various techniques in your body, you specialize in the astral origin art. With this item in hand, if you were to learn the supreme secret techniques of the Chaos Star Masters, even the strongest of the ages would be extremely wary of you. Supreme secret technique? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. He had a question just now. The Chaos Star Masters were clearly not a match for the strongest of all time, and they were always suppressing the strongest of all time. Why were the Chaos Star Masters of every generation able to live well? Clearly this so-called supreme secret technique was the key. Seeing Yi Xian's stunned expression, Elder Xing smiled with satisfaction. You should have guessed it. That's right. The reason why we Chaos Star Masters can protect the Chaos Verse is not only because we can borrow the power of the Chaos Verse, but also because of this item and the supreme secret technique. This legacy item is extremely powerful, and only Chaos Star Masters are able to use it. When a supreme secret technique is combined with this item, it can bring forth chaos heavenly punishment. Even the strongest of all time would be in danger of death under the chaos heavenly punishment. This is also the reason why we Chaos Star Masters have been able to survive until today. Yi Xian completely understood after Elder Xing's explanation. No wonder the strongest of all eternity feared the Chaos Star Masters. It was because they could summon chaos heavenly punishment. However, this supreme secret technique can only be passed down through word of mouth. As long as you agree to protect the Chaos Verse and maintain the stability of the 10th epoch, I can give you this legacy item, and even teach you the supreme secret technique, Elder Xing said in an enticing manner. Unfortunately, Yi Xian was extremely calm. He wasn't tempted by Elder Xing at all, because the price he offered was too low. He was merely feared by the strongest of all times. This wasn't what Yi Xian wanted at all. What Yi Xian wanted was very simple. He wanted to surpass the strongest of all eternity, and even the ancient shadow. He wanted to truly stand above the Chaos Verse. I'm sorry, but I can't promise you that. You can keep this supreme secret technique and item for yourselves. Yi Xian turned and left, not giving Elder Xing a chance to persuade him to stay. Yi Xian, you have received the inheritance of the Chaos Star Masters. You have to shoulder the responsibility of protecting the Chaos Verse. Don't force me to take action. Elder Xing angrily shouted. Astral energy whizzed out and sealed this part of the universe. Although he wasn't the strongest of all eternity, he was still in existence that surpassed the immortal realm. He could even put up a fight against the strongest of all eternity. I don't want to be enemies with the Chaos Star Masters, but if you insist on forcing me, then we'll have to settle this karma. Yi Xian was still striding forward, but his voice rang out in Elder Xing's ears. In Yi Xian's creed, no one could force him to do anything he didn't want to do. The strongest of all eternity couldn't, the Chaos Star Masters couldn't, and even the taboo ancient shadow couldn't. You? Elder Xing's face was filled with anger as he watched Yi Xian walk further and further away. His eyes flashed continuously, but he didn't attack Yi Xian in the end. He could only sigh and open the sealed space. Chi. Yi Xian moved unhindered in the sky, but his expression was extremely cold. A fierce glint flashed across his eyes. Too weak. He was really too weak. Scheming against the Lord of all spirits, betting his life with the heaven-devouring demon lord, and even facing the 9th generation Chaos Star Master. He was using his life to threaten them. No matter how many times he said it, the root of all this was because he was too weak. He had to be strong quickly. Only by becoming strong quickly could he survive. Indeed, according to the number of years Yi Xian had lived, he was currently at the Yang Birth realm. This could already be said to be unprecedented. Other than Liu Bai, no one else could compare to him. Yi Xian could definitely be considered an outstanding talent among the younger generation. Not many people could compete with him. However, the feeling of helplessness when facing the strongest of all eternity and the Chaos Star Masters was like poison that gnawed at his body and mind. It made Yi Xian so depressed that he almost couldn't breathe. Scheming, risking his life, using all means possible, and even using the ancient Shadow Master to intimidate others. This seemed to be Yi Xian's methods, but wasn't it also his humiliation? If he had the cultivation to not fear the strongest of all eternity, why would he go through so much trouble to scheme all this just to find a place for himself to survive? Even an immortal realm cultivator would be able to kill him easily, not to mention the strongest of all eternity and the Chaos Star Masters. The strong were as heavy as a mountain, while the weak crawled like an ant. There was really no reason in this world. If you were weak, you deserved to die. If you were weak, you should kneel. If you were weak, you should be at the mercy of others without even a chance to resist. If one wanted to be above others, then one had to be strong enough to be fearless of anyone and trample everyone under one's feet. However, Yi Xian couldn't do it now. He knew that he didn't have the ability to do so. Therefore, Yi Xian's heart had completely darkened at this moment. His mind was filled with thoughts of becoming stronger, and he didn't hesitate to use any means. No one expected that the pressure that the strongest of all eternity gave Yi Xian not only didn't crush him, but it also made him go completely crazy. The dark flames in his heart burned fiercely, and when these flames were released, they could burn down the heavens. When an ordinary person went crazy, it was terrifying. When an ordinary person went crazy, it was even more terrifying. It just so happened that Yi Xian wasn't an ordinary person. The deepest part of his heart contained the seed of darkness. When he started to go crazy, the consequences would affect the entire chaos verse. At this moment, Yi Xian's aura was very, very cold. This wasn't a reflection of his cultivation base, but an inexplicable temperament. This kind of coldness was bone-chilling and seemed to be able to affect the souls of others, giving them a soul-shaking feeling. Qi. Yi Xian flashed through the sky as the heaven burial technique crazily circulated within his body. The gray light around his body faintly carried a strand of black energy. This strand of black energy was extremely shocking, and it actually caused a crack to appear in the surrounding space. It was also at this moment that several pairs of eyes slowly opened in several inexplicable places in the chaos verse. A terrifying aura quietly swept past them, and then these eyes closed again, as if they had never appeared. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.